Chapter 376. Gu Xingyin waved her hand to block the sword that was less than a foot away from her. With a flick of her spear, she cleanly knocked the opponent off his horse. She had been in this world for 3 days. On the battlefield, the smoke of war and hot blood. Victory! General, we won. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and smiled. She raised the spear in her hand. Soldiers, pack up the spoils of war and return to enjoy our wine and feast. Good. Good. In this life, she transmigrated into a general with illustrious military achievements. Fu Yunjin, the 32nd generation descendant of the war god clan of the Tianyun dynasty. She was also the inheritor of the war god clan's bloodline glory. She was an invincible general. At the age of 24, she was personally bestowed the position of great general by the emperor. However, in Gu Xingyin's eyes, Fu Yunjin's life was inexplicably sad. Because Fu Yunjin was a woman. She should have been pampered and spoiled as she grew up, enjoying the love of her family. However, her mother passed away during childbirth. Her father loved her mother to the extreme and was unwilling to remarry. In order to not let the war god family's prestige fall, he actually announced to the public that his deceased wife had given birth to a baby boy and raised Fu Yunjin as a boy. While the other young ladies were enjoying the flowers, she was practicing her spear with sandbags tied to her wrists and legs. While the other young ladies were parading through the streets, she was being sternly reprimanded by her father for studying the art of war. She was able to become a great general at the age of 24. What she relied on was not the war god clan's reputation, but her own blood, tears, and sweat. As a woman, Fu Yunjin had already decided not to marry for the rest of her life. She was the sacrifice of the war god clan's so-called glory. She did not want to have a child like her in the future. However, the affairs of the world were always unpredictable. In order to show his love for his subjects, the emperor personally bestowed a marriage to her. He gave the second princess of the imperial concubine to her. But how could she marry the princess? Fu Yunjin had been thinking about how to reject this marriage. However, she did not expect that the second princess, who was famous for her beauty, would be such a vicious woman. She had been in love with Fang Mingyu, the eldest son of Zhu Guo Manor, for a long time. In order to escape this marriage, she had actually bribed an assassin to assassinate Fu Yunjin when he was returning with his army. No matter how powerful Fu Yunjin was, he was only one person, not to mention that the other party had come prepared. The sharp blade was smeared with a poison that could seal a marquis. She was poisoned. Even if she used her inner force to suppress the poison in her body, she couldn't hold on for long. Just like that, a famous general of a generation lost his life in the hands of a vicious woman. Until Fu Yunjin's death, other than her father, old General Fu Yingjie, no one else knew that she was a girl. When she was born, her father did not like her. When she died, she was also hated by another woman. Gu Xingyin silently received the memories provided by the system. Fu Yunjin shouldn't have died. She was a rare military genius of the Tianyun dynasty. According to normal development, she should have led her hundreds of thousands of cavalry to expand the Tianyun dynasty's territory and create the strongest iron and blood empire. Therefore, Gu Xingyin came to her. At this time, Fu Yunjin had just led the army to defeat the invasion of the neighboring country. Tomorrow, the army would be reorganized and return to the capital. General, everyone is waiting for you. Deputy General Zhang Yuan shouted from outside the tent. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses and replied with a smile, "Okay. I'll be right there." Chapter 377. When she lifted the curtain and went out, she found that there was already a bonfire outside. The soldiers were all holding wine bowls in their hands, waiting for her. "General, today, we have so many people, we must make you drunk." "Yes. Today, we must make you drunk. Come, General, let me give you a toast." Gu Xingyin smiled and opened a jar of wine. She picked it up and put it in her hand. She laughed and said, "Good, you guys, you've already discussed to make me drunk. You all better pray that I fall today, otherwise, tomorrow on the military field, we'll all come one by one." Her words made many people show a look of lingering fear. Deputy General Zhang Yuan saw this and laughed, "Don't be scared by the general. We have so many people, can't we make him drunk?" Everyone burst into laughter. Gu Xingyin cooperated and downed the wine in her hand, bowl by bowl. She liked this kind of atmosphere. She was going back to that annoying capital city tomorrow. If there was wine today, she would get drunk first. "Your Highness, General Fu's army is almost at the city gate." Jiang Shuha's personal maid reported Fu Yunjin's movements to her. She thought that Her Highness was restless because she was about to see her fiancé, but she didn't know that Her Highness's thoughts were completely different. Jiang Shuha's handkerchief was tightly clenched. She was still a little scared. She knew that her imperial father trusted Fu Yunjin and even praised him as an important minister of the country. If her imperial father knew what she did, Jiang Shuha's face turned pale. No matter how much she was doted on, her imperial father could still cripple her. For a moment, she had the intention to cancel this assassination. But in the next moment, she thought of her cousin. If Fu Yunjin didn't die, how could she have the chance to marry her cousin? Thinking of this, she slowly calmed down. "Fu Yunjin, you can only blame yourself for being an eyesore and blocking this princess's path." At this moment, Gu Xingyin was very clear that the killer sent by second Princess Jiang Shuha to kill her was hidden among the people who lined the streets to welcome her not far from the city gate. However, Fu Yunjin's reputation as the #1 martial artist in the current dynasty was not for nothing. This time, Gu Xingyin was well prepared. Jiang Shuha's plan could not be realized. "Here it comes." Gu Xingyin's ears twitched. She leaned back on her horse and dodged a stray arrow that came out of nowhere. At the same time, the silver spear that had never left her hand drew a cold gleam under the sunlight and went straight for an assassin that was pouncing on her. The long spear shot out like a cold bolt of lightning, swift and unpredictable. It was a one-hit kill. At the same time, the deputy generals and guards behind her also took out their weapons and surrounded her. From their actions, it was obvious that they were prepared. "Leave him alive. This general wants to see who dares to be so daring in front of the imperial city's gate." Gu Xingyin's eyes were cold and murderous as she coldly shouted. "Yes. Princess, something bad has happened." The maid who was sent out to investigate the situation ran in with a panicked face. Did it succeed? Jiang Shuha stood up and tried to suppress the joy in her heart. She asked with a worried face, "What happened?" The maid said, "Replying to your highness, this servant just heard the news. When the deputy general returned to the city, he was attacked by an assassination." Jiang Shuha thought that it was as expected. She quickly continued to ask, "What about the general? Did something happen?" Chapter 378. The maidservant looked at the anxious expression on the princess's face and thought that she was worried about the safety of General Fu. She quickly smiled and said, "Your Highness, don't worry. Who is the deputy general? He is the new god of war of our Tianyun dynasty. How can a few rascals hurt the general?" Jiang Shuha only felt that her heart was empty. This was a failure. Seeing her in a trance, the maidservant thought that she was still worried about Fu Yunjin. She smiled and comforted, "Your Highness, don't worry. General Fu has already entered the city to meet His Majesty. It is said that he also detained a few assassins. You don't have to worry." "What did you say?" Jiang Shuha was shocked. "He actually caught people. Those are trash." The maidservant was a little confused. Jiang Shuha closed her eyes, "Leave. This princess wants to be alone for a while." The maidservant was a little puzzled, but she still obeyed her orders and left. After the maidservant left, Jiang Shuhe slumped on the chair. Now, she could only hope that those people's mouths were tight enough and that they would not give her away. Gu Xingyin entered the palace to meet His Majesty. The emperor also heard that she was attacked when she entered the city. In order to show his concern for his beloved official, the emperor was furious on the spot. Not only did he order a strict investigation, he also bestowed countless treasures to comfort Gu Xingyin. After the emperor and his official appreciated each other, Gu Xingyin prepared to return home with a large wave of rewards. Following a eunuch outside the palace, Gu Xingyin's attention was attracted by a carriage. There were not many people who could use this carriage in the palace. Moreover, looking at the regulations, this was not the style used by the women in the harem. While she was thinking, the other side had already passed by her. At this time, a gust of wind blew over. In a flash, Gu Xingyin saw half of a pale face. Seeing her gaze, the little eunuch who was leading the way whispered, "General Fu doesn't know. That is His Highness Prince Rong's carriage. His Highness Prince Rong just returned to the palace not long ago. At that time, you were leading the troops to war." Gu Xingyin withdrew her gaze and smiled, "Thank you for answering my doubts." Prince Rong, Jiang Huan, was a character that had only been mentioned a few times in the original plot. Prince Rong was the Empress Dowager's youngest son, and Jin Shang's biological brother from the same mother. Ever since he was born with a congenital deficiency. At that time, even the imperial physicians did not dare to guarantee that he would be able to survive. At that time, it was the senior monk of Fayan Temple who suggested that Prince Rong be placed in the temple to be raised and prayed for Buddha's protection. The Empress Dowager believed him and sent Prince Rong to Fayan Temple as a lay disciple. She didn't expect Prince Rong's body to get better day by day in the temple. Now, although his body was still weaker than ordinary people, his life was no longer in danger. Jin Shang pitied his younger brother's weak body, and the age gap between the two was very large. He almost treated Prince Rong as his own son, doting on him even more than his own son. When it came to favor, Prince Rong was at the top of the list in the imperial city. When it came to the people who could not be offended in the imperial city, Prince Rong was often the first to be mentioned. Gu Xingyin, however, slowly smiled. "I didn't expect to see my lover on the first day I returned to the capital." On the other side, Prince Rong, Jiang Huan, was also thinking about Gu Xingyin, who he had just met. He had only heard of General Fu's name before, but had never seen him in person. Today, he saw him for the first time. He never expected that this young general would look so attractive. Chapter 379. He looked over from the carriage and saw the young general in silver armor standing in the shadows. The blood-red cloak added a hint of sternness to his face, and his eyes were rarely exquisite. This General Fu, who was famous for his military exploits, was not as tall and burly as he had imagined. Even from a man's point of view, his figure could be said to be somewhat thin and weak. The curtain fell and the young general's figure disappeared in front of him. Jiang Huan didn't know why, but there was a surge of disappointment in his heart. His thoughts drifted uncontrollably. If this General Fu were to change his clothes and walk in the crowd, he would most likely be mistaken as a pampered young master from a wealthy family, right? King Rong entered the palace to see the emperor. The old emperor was very tolerant of this brother who was 2 rounds younger than himself. He personally got up and helped Jiang Huan up. The two were just chatting when Jiang Huan suddenly talked about Gu Xingyin. "When I entered the palace just now, I saw General Fu." The emperor had always had a good impression of Yun Zhen. Hearing this, he became interested. "Xian, this is the first time you've seen Yun Zhen, right? What do you think?" Xian was King Rong's name, which was personally given to him by the late Empress Dowager. Jiang Huan said with a smile on his face, "I just took a quick glance and only felt that this General Fu was like a jade tree in front of the court. He was beautiful. If it weren't for the battle robe he was wearing, he wouldn't look like a general on the battlefield. Instead, he looked like a rich young master. The emperor laughed. Xian, don't say this to Yunjin. He hates it when people talk about his appearance. Jiang Huan was still smiling. Appearance is bestowed by one's parents. Xian thinks that beauty is something that makes people happy. General Fu is obsessed with it. The emperor helplessly glared at him. You have been cultivating in the temple for so many years. Even when you speak, you sound like a monk. Jiang Huan smiled but didn't say anything. After Gu Xingyin left the palace, she returned to the Fu residence. She didn't even change her clothes and went straight to visit her father, old General Fu, who was now idle at home. Greetings, father. Gu Xing's expression was solemn as he bowed in a formal manner. Old General Fu looked at his expressionless daughter in silence. After a long time, he said, "Get up." He withdrew his hands from his sleeves without leaving a trace. After Gu Xingyin got up, she stood quietly to the side. The father and daughter looked at each other in silence. After an unknown amount of time, Gu Xingyin felt that the atmosphere was too awkward. Finally, she said, "Father, do you have any instructions for me? If there is nothing else, I will take my leave." Old General Fu treated his daughter as if she was a businesswoman, but he couldn't hide the disappointment in his heart. This child, she had finally given up on him. Gu Xingyin saw that he didn't say anything, so she took it as a yes. She bowed in the direction of her father and walked out of the door. After Gu Xingyin left, old General Fu turned to the old housekeeper, who had been standing beside him, and asked, "Changfu, do you think she hates me?" The old housekeeper was silent. "General, you are thinking too much." As the only person who knew about the relationship between the father and daughter, the housekeeper had seen it for many years. Sometimes, even he felt that the general was too much to the young miss. But he was just a servant. What could he say about the master's affairs? Chapter 380. As expected, the assassins who tried to kill Fu Yunjin did not mention second Princess Jiang Shuha. They all knew that if they said it, they would die. If they didn't say it, they would die. If they didn't say it, at most they would die. If they said it, with second princess's ruthlessness, perhaps their entire family would be buried with her. Because they were unable to find out the mastermind, the emperor once again felt that he owed Fu Yunjin. Another large wave of rewards flowed into the general's residence. However, the more the emperor expressed his appreciation for Fu Yunjin, the more flustered second princess Jiang Shuha became. The emperor liked Fu Yunjin so much, he would definitely not agree to her breaking off the engagement. If she stubbornly refused, perhaps the engagement would be cancelled in the end. But if that happened, imperial father would definitely dislike her. Even the Zhuge manor would not be willing to marry a princess who was not liked by the emperor. Princess Shuha was unwilling to marry someone she did not like, but she could not give up her honor. After thinking about it, she could only go find Fu Yunjin. When Gu Xingyin heard that the princess had arrived, he was shocked. Logically speaking, as fiancés, it was not appropriate for the two to meet. But since the princess did not care, as an official, he naturally had to go and welcome her personally. "Your humble servant, Fu Yunjin, greets your highness." Princess Shuha did not ask him to rise. Instead, she looked Fu Yunjin up and down. Her heart was tied to her cousin, Fang Mingyu, and she had never looked at her fiancé in the eye. Now that she finally looked at him carefully, she actually felt a sense of shock. Gu Xingyin did not need to go to the battlefield, so she naturally did not need to wear that armor. Today, she wore a snow-white robe embroidered with silver patterns, and a light green gauze overcoat. Her long hair was tied up with a white jade crown. Her lips were red, her teeth were white, and her face was like jade. In all fairness, in terms of appearance, Gu Xingyin's appearance was not inferior to the handsome young master of the Zhuge Duke manor. "General Fu, please rise." Princess Shuha's face was red, and even her voice was much gentler. Gu Xingyin stood up as instructed. She lowered her eyes and stood at the side, waiting for Princess Shuha to speak. I came here today to tell you that I already have someone in my heart. If you know your place, you should go and tell my father to cancel our marriage, Princess Shu he said as if it was a matter of fact. Gu Xingyin sneered in her heart. She thought the princess would say something. It was actually this. For Fu Yunjin to die in the hands of such a woman was indeed an injustice. She had a look of disbelief on her face. After a long while, she said to Princess Shu He, Your Highness, our marriage was personally bestowed by His Majesty. Disobeying the imperial edict is a great crime. This humble subject does not dare to offend His Majesty. She looked at Princess Shu He who raised an eyebrow and was about to explode. Without waiting for her to speak, she continued, Of course, Your Highness the princess is of noble birth and deeply favored by the emperor. If you are not willing to marry this subject, the Holy One will not force you. She wanted to get rid of the marriage but didn't want to be a bad person. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Did she really think everyone else was an idiot? She didn't even deal with her for the assassination, and Princess Shu He still had the face to come. Princess Shu He didn't think that a general like Fu Yunjin would have so many tricks up his sleeve. He didn't fall for her provocation at all and pushed the matter back with just a few words. She purposely said those words to anger Fu Yunjin. If he couldn't bear her humiliation and did something impulsive, she would have a way to put the blame on him. Chapter 381. Of course, if Fu Yunjin could not bear the humiliation and ran to imperial father to ask to cancel the marriage, that would be the best. Most generals had explosive tempers, and Princess Shu He did not think that the famous General Fu would be an exception. But she had not expected that this General Fu would be able to endure this kind of humiliation without any change in expression. Was he a man or not? Princess Shu He looked angrily at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin easily saw the meaning in her eyes. She really wanted to say to this princess, Sorry, you guessed right, I really am not a man. Princess Shu He glared at her for a moment and then said angrily, Fu Yunjin, this princess will say it here today, I will not marry you. You are just a toad-eating swan meat. You want to marry this princess, that is wishful thinking. After saying this, she carefully looked at Gu Xingyin, hoping to see something from her expression. But Gu Xingyin's expression did not change. She said faintly, Your Highness, your words are useless to me. My Fu family has always been loyal to the emperor. The Fu family has no reason to go against His Majesty's decree. If your Highness is not willing, you can directly report to the emperor. After saying this, she looked at Princess Shu He whose eyes were even wider and continued, This official is wholeheartedly for the country and originally had no interest in love. But the emperor's decree has already been sent. If there are no accidents, this official will be on the same level as your Highness and treat each other with respect. The meaning of these words was, You look down on me, Fu Yunjin, and I, Fu Yunjin, do not like you that much. But because the emperor has decreed the marriage, I will treat you respectfully after marriage. You do not need to think about anything else. Princess Shu He's face turned green from her blunt rebuttal. Her chest rose and fell for a moment before she said coldly, Such a clever and eloquent General Fu. This princess only knew that you were skilled in the art of war, but I did not expect General Fu's tongue to be sharper than a normal woman's. Gu Xingyin smiled faintly in response. There is no harm in having more skills. Your Highness is too kind. Princess Shu He left angrily. The reason why she dared to be so brazen was that she was relying on the man's pride. As for being despised by his fiancée in front of his face and wanting to break off the engagement, any man with even the slightest bit of courage would not spread the news. But she was wrong. Fu Yunjin was not a man at all. If she could break off this engagement with the princess, not only would she be able to solve a huge problem in front of her, but she would also be able to use this as an excuse to refuse other marriages in the future. The price of such a good thing was only to be laughed at behind his back for a period of time. To Fu Yunjin, it was nothing. Gu Xingyin went out in a good mood. She had to think carefully about how to bring up this matter to the emperor. Of course, the marriage had to be called off, but he couldn't be the one to say it first. Princess Shu he wanted to pull herself out of this so easily. Not so easy. Gu Xingyin was dressed like a rich young master, strolling casually on the street. She was born beautiful and dressed luxuriously. From time to time, her eyes would wander around and she would smile, making many young ladies blush. I say, who are you? You dirted this young master's clothes and you think you can get away with just an apology? Do you know who this young master is? An arrogant voice entered Gu Xingyin's ears. She looked towards the direction of the voice. Chapter 382. The young master who spoke was dressed gorgeously and held a folding fan in his hand in the middle of autumn, looking elegant. Gu Xingyin looked at him carefully. He could barely be considered handsome, but his complexion was a little pale and his steps were unsteady. It seemed like he spent a lot of energy on his beauty. Gu Xingyin felt that he looked familiar. Opposite him was an inconspicuous carriage covered by a green cloth. The coachman was a bearded man who was over 40 years old. The moment Gu Xingyin saw this man, her heart quivered. Her intuition as a military general told her that this was an expert. At this time, the young master spoke again. Do you know how much this young master's clothes cost? People like you won't be able to pay it back in your lifetime. The clothes he was wearing were just a little dusty. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see it. Gu Xingyin heard the people around her talking. So pitiful, why did he have to meet this devil incarnate? Yes, it's most likely that this person lost money in the casino again. He's feeling unhappy now and bumped into the muzzle of the gun. Sai, who asked his father to be the marquis. When Gu Xingyin heard this, she suddenly remembered who this young master was. The famous hedonistic son of the Marquis of Baocheng, Wuxia. Gu Xingyin thought of this famous hedonistic son because this guy didn't abstain from meat and vegetables. There was once when he saw Fu Yunjin dressed casually, he actually had those shameful thoughts and wanted to use force on her. The result was obvious. Fu Yunjin gave him a fierce beating, then ordered people to strip him down to his underwear and send him back to the Marquis of Baocheng's residence. Marquis Baocheng's heart ached terribly, but after knowing what this unfilial son had done, he still had to bring gifts to the general's residence to apologize. Gu Xingyin felt that it was a misfortune for Marquis Baocheng to have such a son. Her heart skipped a beat and she was about to step forward when she heard a clear voice coming from inside the carriage. Since it was my servant who dirted young master's clothes, we are in the wrong. At the same time, the curtain of the carriage was lifted by a white hand from the inside. The joints of this hand were clearly defined, and the shape of the hand was graceful. In addition to the clear voice from before, it wasn't hard to imagine what kind of appearance the young master sitting in the carriage had. This hand was holding an ingot of gold. The coachman took the gold from the person in the carriage and handed it to the young master of the Baocheng Marquis. This young master, I am truly sorry. This is my young master's apology for dirtying your clothes. An ingot of gold. No matter how expensive Huijiabao's clothes were, it was enough for him to buy another set. But at this moment, Huijiabao was not looking at the ingot of gold. Instead, his gaze was fixed in the direction of the carriage curtain. Young master, I don't want your gold. Let your young master have a meal with me and this matter will be over. How about it? Huijiabao thought of the jade-like hand from before and felt his heart itch. The coachman's expression changed when he heard those words that seemed to have a deeper meaning. Gu Xingyin saw his finger move and knew that he was about to make a move. She sighed in her heart and stepped out from the crowd. Young Master Hua, long time no see. How have you been? When Huijiabao saw her, his expression changed. Chapter 383. You. Why are you here? Hu Jiabao would never forget the pain this handsome man brought to him. Gu Xingyin laughed heartily. What are you talking about, young Master Hu? In this imperial city, does anyone who wants to come here have to get your permission? Hu Jiabao naturally didn't dare to agree. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. It's been a long time since we last met. Seeing young Master Hu again, this scene seems a bit familiar. It would have been better if she didn't say it, but once she did, Hu Jiabao's face became ugly. This wasn't a familiar scene. Didn't he also have a sudden lust when he was beaten up? Hu Jiabao sternly said, Fu Yunjin, don't think you're invincible just because you know some martial arts. It's not your turn to meddle in this young master's affairs. Gu Xingyin put away her smile and slowly said, that's really unfortunate. What if I say that today, I want to meddle in this matter? Hu Jiabao angrily glared at her. Gu Xingyin smiled and looked back. In the end, Hu Jiabao weighed the pros and cons and felt that the difference in strength between the enemy and himself was too big. He coldly snorted and said, Fu Yunjin, you better pray that one day you don't fall into this young master's hands. Gu Xingyin didn't take these words to heart. Generally, these kinds of people who only dared to say harsh words usually didn't have a second chance to make a comeback. Seeing that the matter here was settled, she lifted her leg and wanted to leave. Unexpectedly, the coachman opened his mouth. This is General Fu. Our young master is grateful for General Fu's help and specially invited young master to come to the carriage for a chat. Gu Xingyin's footsteps paused. She was also a bit curious as to what kind of person could have such an expert as a coachman. After thinking for a bit, she boarded the carriage. She didn't know how shocked the coachman was at this moment. No outsider had ever boarded his master's carriage. So it's His Highness Prince Rong. Gu Xingyin was really surprised. She didn't think that the person inside the carriage was her lover. If she had known earlier that it was him, she wouldn't have needed to worry about the driver's retaliation in the future. However, Hu Jiabao dared to covet her lover. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt that she had let Hu Jiabao go too easily just now. Jiang Huan was surprised to see that she recognized him. General Fu, have you seen me before? Gu Xingyin smiled. I was fortunate enough to meet your highness in the imperial palace. Jiang Huan smiled. Thank you for your help, General. Gu Xingyin was a little embarrassed. I didn't know it was your highness in the carriage. My actions were unnecessary. Jiang Huan didn't know why he treated General Fu so differently. He had been cultivating in the temple since he was a child, so he was very indifferent to people and things. Ever since his mother passed away, other than his only brother, his emotions were almost unaffected by other people. However, he had only caught a glimpse of General Fu that day and remembered him in his heart. Today, when he found out that General Fu was the one who helped him out outside, his heart was filled with an inexplicable joy. Even before he could react, he invited General Fu into his carriage. He put away these thoughts and smiled at Gu Xingyin. My name is Xian. General, you can call me Xian. Gu Xingyin hesitated for a moment and said, Xian. Jiang Huan smiled. Gu Xingyin said with some embarrassment. The family of a general is not so particular. Xian can just call me Yunjin. Chapter 384. Jiang Huan nodded and said with a smile, seeing Yunjin today, I feel like old friends at first sight. I've buried a few jars of good old wine in the manor outside the city. Yunjin, do you want to come along? Gu Xingyin replied with a smile, if there's wine, there's friends. There's no reason not to go. The carriage moved forward slowly. Gu Xingyin sat for a while and saw Jiang Huan's tired face. She remembered that her lover's body was not well in this life and asked worriedly, Xian, do you want to rest for a while? Jiang Huan did not try to be brave. Perhaps the road outside was not very smooth, but the bumps in the carriage were uncomfortable. Jiang Huan's carriage did not look conspicuous from the outside, but it was well equipped. To accommodate his body, there was even a small couch covered with a thick blanket. He looked at Gu Xingyin apologetically, then closed his eyes and leaned against the couch to rest. Gu Xingyin could finally look at her lover openly. Jiang Huan's appearance was very good. His eyebrows were just right, but he was different from her delicate appearance when she was dressed as a man. He had the kind of elegance that belonged to a man. However, Gu Xingyin looked at Jiang Huan's pale face and hesitated. Jiang Huan's health was indeed not very good. Gu Xingyin contacted the system. Why can't I choose the abilities of my previous world in these worlds? The system replied in a methodical manner, host, the level of each world is different. For example, the Apocalypse, the Magic World, and the Blood Breed world that you've experienced before are all high-energy worlds. They can't be compared to the low-martial world that you're in. Similarly, the abilities of the high-energy worlds are beyond the range that the low-energy worlds can withstand. The host cannot use them in these worlds. Gu Xingyin was speechless. If that's the case, these abilities are actually useless. The high-energy worlds had their own power system, so the effects of those abilities would naturally be weakened. And the low-martial worlds could not use those powerful abilities. The system was just painting a pie in the sky for her. The system said, please understand. If the abilities of the high-energy worlds are used in the low-energy worlds, it will easily trigger a warning from the laws. In serious cases, it can even cause the world to collapse. A long time ago, when there were no ability restrictions, the system saw a host use forbidden magic in a low-energy world and directly destroyed a country. Gu Xingyin, I'm just complaining. As a human that was created, compared to normal humans, there were still some differences. For example, her understanding of the system's methods, and desire. The desire of normal people would get bigger as they get more things. This was not shown on Gu Xingyin. The system was also quite satisfied with Gu Xingyin as its host. It had never seen such a carefree host. Gu Xingyin suddenly asked, System, is there any medicine that can strengthen the body? The system glanced at the sleeping Jiang Huan and answered, yes. A white light flashed, and a small porcelain bottle appeared in Gu Xingyin's hand that was hidden in her sleeve. The system's product, a health pill from a high-class world. Put it in water and it will dissolve in the mouth. It's colorless and odorless, and has no side effects. Gu Xingyin squinted her eyes happily. As long as it did not involve the storyline characters, the system was very tolerant of its host. Chapter 385. The carriage traveled for an unknown period of time before it finally stopped at a place. Gu Xingyin got up and lifted the curtain. Sure enough, she found that they were no longer in the imperial city. She came back to her senses and glanced at Jiang Huan. She found that he had opened his eyes and sat up. Gu Xingyin smiled and didn't say much. She turned and got off the carriage. Jiang Huan followed. This was a large manor. Seeing that it was clean and tidy, and the flowers and trees in the courtyard were neat and tidy, Gu Xingyin knew that there were people serving here all year round. Jiang Huan led the way for Gu Xingyin. This was the manor that Imperial Mother chose for me. She liked the quiet environment here, and there won't be any disturbances. The carriage driver was not by their side. He should have driven the carriage somewhere. There were people in the manor leading the way for the two. Someone had already prepared fresh fruits and snacks in the courtyard. The two sat down and rested for a while. Jiang Huan ordered, go get my good tea. He smiled and said, it's not good to drink wine at this time. When night comes, I'll tell them to prepare delicacies to go with the wine. Yunjin and I will drink under the bright moon. Gu Xingyin smiled and nodded. As Xian says. The tea was quickly served, but it wasn't brewed. A servant brought over a small stove and a set of utensils. It looked like Jiang Huan was going to brew the tea himself. Jiang Huan felt that the more he looked at Gu Xingyin, the more he liked her. This feeling of familiarity at first sight was really rare. The servants are vulgar. I'll brew a pot of tea for Yunjin. Gu Xingyin smiled as she watched him brew the tea step by step like moving clouds and flowing water. She held it in front of her. Try it. Gu Xingyin picked up the teacup and gently sniffed it. Then she took a sip. Her eyes couldn't help but brighten. Is this the best Yuqian Longjing tea? Jiang Huan was just expressing his respect for his good friend. He thought that Gu Xingyin, a general, would not be too particular about the way of tea. He did not expect that the other party would be able to taste what kind of tea it was. His surprise was mixed with an even greater pleasant surprise. It was like when you originally thought that someone was a friend who could get along with you, but after interacting with them, you realized that not only did they feel like old friends at first sight, but they could also admire the flowers and discuss the moon with you, and they had more in common. Jiang Huan nodded. I didn't expect Yunjin to have studied tea as well. Gu Xingyin didn't answer the question directly. Instead, she smiled and said, not only do I know that this tea is top-notch Yuqian Longjing, but I also know that the water used to make this tea is mountain spring water. Jiang Huan looked at Gu Xingyin as if he was looking at a rare treasure. Gu Xingyin chuckled inwardly. Fu Yunjin indeed didn't know much about what he found, but Jiang Lingzhen, Liang Qinyu, and the system did. She was very willing to have more in common with her lover. The two sat and chatted for a while. After that, Jiang Huan took Gu Xingyin to tour the vicinity of the manor. When the sun set and the two returned, Jiang Huan already wished that he could hold his new friend's hand and become sworn brothers with him. How could there be someone in this world who was so compatible with her? No matter what topic they talked about, he could always think of the same thing as her. Of course, Gu Xingyin deliberately did this, but it was undeniable that she and Jiang Huan got along very happily. Someone had already set up steaming hot dishes and aged wine in the courtyard. Jiang Huan dismissed the servants and took Gu Xingyin's hand. Come, Yunjin, today, I must drink with you until we are drunk. Chapter 386. It was said that they would not go home until they were drunk. In fact, with Jiang Huan's body, it was destined that he could not really get drunk. Even if he was willing to risk his life to accompany his confidant, Gu Xingyin could not watch her lover risk his own body. So, the situation became that Gu Xingyin drank one cup after another, while Jiang Huan only held the wine cup and occasionally took a sip. Occasionally, he drank too much and was glared at by the half-drunk Gu Xingyin, so he had to put down the cup with a bitter smile. In the blink of an eye, there were 2 empty jars on the ground. Jiang Huan looked at Gu Xingyin, whose face was already a little red. He knew his own collection of fine wine. All of them were good aged wine. If ordinary people could drink one jar, they would be praised for their good alcohol tolerance. Gu Xingyin had drunk 2 jars in a row. He stopped Gu Xingyin's hand from continuing to open the next jar. Yunjin, that's enough. Gu Xingyin was actually a little drunk at this moment. Her eyes were gleaming as she glanced at Jiang Huan with a mixture of joy and annoyance. She dodged his hand and deftly opened the wine jar. Jiang Huan only felt that there was an indescribable charm in her eyes. It was a kind of flirtatious feeling. Immediately, he realized what he was thinking. He could not help but laugh and shake his head. It seemed that he was drunk. Yunjin was a man. How could he have such eyes? While he was thinking, Gu Xingyin drank a few more cups of wine. Seeing that he did not speak and was deep in thought, Gu Xingyin blinked and giggled. What's wrong with you, Xian? Is there something on your mind? Jiang Huan came back to his senses and looked at Gu Xingyin, who was drunk. He shook his head and smiled. No. Gu Xingyin half supported her head. She looked at him with blurred eyes and said, You don't have anything on your mind, but I do. Jiang Huan originally thought that she was joking, but who knew that Gu Xingyin would continue, "I don't want to marry Princess Shu He." Jiang Huan's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. Only now did he remember that the person in front of him was not only his confidant, but also his niece, Princess Shu He's future son-in-law. He didn't know why, but there was an uncomfortable feeling in his heart. Obviously, Fu Yunjin was young and promising, and Princess Shu He was a natural beauty. The two of them were a perfect match, and he should be happy for his good friend. Hearing Gu Xingyin say that he did not want to marry the princess, Jiang Huan's rationality told him that he should stop Gu Xingyin from continuing. However, he personally poured a glass of wine for the person opposite him and asked, "Why?" The familiar scent made Gu Xingyin completely let down her guard. Her head was dizzy and she couldn't even hear the system's call. She subconsciously answered Jiang Huan's question, "Why?" "Because I can't marry her." And she looked at Jiang Huan and said with a smile, "Princess Shu He doesn't like me. She personally came to me and asked me to ask His Majesty to cancel the engagement. She thinks that I'm a fool. This is defying the imperial edict." Seeing Gu Xingyin say such words without a care in her eyes, Jiang Huan felt a surge of anger in his heart. His niece, who was famous in the capital, actually did such a thing. This was simply a blatant humiliation to his face. He felt that it was unfair for his good friend. He must be very upset about this, right? If he wasn't drunk, he was afraid that Yunjin would bury this in his heart for the rest of his life. He thought about it and felt that he should say something to his imperial brother. Chapter 387. Jiang Huan didn't care what Gu Xingyin meant when he said, "I can't marry her." He thought that Gu Xingyin said that because the princess didn't like him and he didn't seem to have any feelings for Shuha. Gu Xingyin raised her head and downed another glass of wine. She supported her chin and stared at Jiang Huan. Jiang Huan knew in his heart that the person sitting opposite him was a drunkard, but he still didn't hide the unnatural look in his eyes. "Yunjin, what are you looking at?" Gu Xingyin was very honest now. She answered whatever he asked her, looking at Heroine. "Jiang Huan," Gu Xingyin continued, "Heroine is so good-looking." "Jiang Huan," Gu Xingyin continued to speak. She narrowed her eyes and lowered her voice mysteriously. She said to Jiang Huan, "Do you know that my name is actually not Fu Yunjin?" "Jiang Huan." "Then what is your name?" Gu Xingyin looked proud, "I won't tell you." "Guess." Jiang Huan. Well, it was not normal for him to answer a drunkard's question seriously. Then, he saw Gu Xingyin, who was opposite him, lying on the table obediently and sleeping. Jiang Huan sighed helplessly. Suddenly, he laughed to himself. He called the servants to clean up and walked in front of Gu Xingyin to help her up. He could have asked the servants to do it, but he didn't know why he didn't want others to do it. Fortunately, although Jiang Huan's body was not very good, he still had the strength to help a person. Moreover, Yunjin not only looked thin and weak, but when he held her in his arms, Jiang Huan realized that the person in his arms was unexpectedly slender. Gu Xingyin moved a little uncomfortably. She felt the familiar scent, so she didn't break away. She buried her head in Jiang Huan's neck. Her warm breath sprinkled on his sensitive skin. Jiang Huan only felt inexplicably hot. Could it be that he was drunk too? Jiang Huan could not help but laugh. He helped her to the guest room that had already been prepared and placed her on the bed. He removed Gu Xingyin's shoes. Just as he reached for his belt, the man on the bed suddenly opened his eyes and stared at him coldly. His hands were not careless at all. Jiang Huan only felt a huge force pass over him. Before he could react, he was already lying on the bed. The man who was lying unconscious on the bed was leaning over him, looking at him with murderous eyes. One of his hands was around Jiang Huan's neck. Jiang Huan only needed one glance to confirm that if he acted rashly, the other party would really kill him. He laughed bitterly and tried his best to relax. I just want to take off your robe so you can sleep more comfortably. The person on top of him stared at him for a while, then suddenly closed his eyes and collapsed on top of him. Fortunately, Gu Xingyin was not heavy. However, the weight of her entire body still made Jiang Huan unable to see clearly. Jiang Huan looked at the person who was sleeping soundly. Only then did he realize that this person had not woken up at all. The series of actions just now was just a conditioned reflex. Thinking of this, a bitter feeling surged in his heart. He was so vigilant even when he was sleeping. He really did not know what kind of life this good friend of his was living. He looked up and saw that the person on top of him was lying obediently in his arms. Half of her face was buried in his chest, and the other half of her face was revealed. How could there be any trace of the murderous aura from before? Feeling the softness and slenderness of the person in his arms, it was hard to imagine that such a person was actually the ever-victorious general whose name shook the entire Tianyun dynasty. Chapter 388. Jiang Huan had also drunk a few glasses of wine. Now that the alcohol had kicked in, and with the warm body in his arms, he inexplicably did not want to let go. In a daze, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. The next day, Jiang Huan was the first to wake up. He had paid attention to his health all these years, and waking up early had long become a habit. However, the heavy feeling from his body made his mind a little muddled. His Highness King Rong had some small habits, such as not liking others to get close to him. What was going on now? He opened his eyes and saw a certain figure half lying in his arms at first glance. After a night of sleep, Gu Xingyin's clothes were a little messy. At this time, her collar was slightly open, revealing the white skin under her neck and a line of delicate collarbone. Looking up, it was her rosy and soft lips, which were slightly open, and a little bit of her ruddy tongue could be seen. It seemed that she had slept well, and the expression on her face was quite satisfied. She looked like a satisfied kitten. Jiang Huan's face unconsciously carried a trace of a smile. He moved and found that half of his body was almost numb. He could not help but let out a hiss. This sound woke Gu Xingyin up. Her mind was still a little muddled. She opened her eyes in a daze. Before she could see clearly who was beside her, she habitually reached out to hold the other person's waist, half closed her eyes, and kissed him on the face. Then, she felt the person beside her stiffen. Gu Xingyin then realized that something was wrong. Her muddled mind finally cleared up this time. She suddenly sat up and looked at Jiang Huan, who was still in a daze after being kissed by her. She showed an awkward smile and explained dryly, "Xian, I'm really sorry. I thought you were." Halfway through, she paused. Who did she think it was? Xia Wanjun. My snow wolf. Gu Xingyin finally found someone she could say. The snow wolf was a wolf with snow-white fur. Fu Yunjin had raised it since it was young, and they were very close. Jiang Huan's face was still a little stiff. Hearing her explanation, he nodded and said, Yunjin should not have such a habit in the future. In his mind, he was thinking that he must not let Yunjin rest in the same room with other people in the future. His habit of hugging and kissing people when he woke up was not good. Gu Xingyin felt a little embarrassed. She quickly got out of bed and said, I'm still a little dizzy. I'm going out to get some fresh air. Then, she went out, leaving Jiang Huan sitting on the bed alone, thinking about that kiss. Jiang Huan's face blushed as he recalled the warm and soft touch from before. Ever since he was young, he had been cultivating in the temple because of his poor health. The number of women he came into contact with had always been few, and he only had a smattering of knowledge about the matters between men and women. Later on, when his health gradually improved, for the sake of his health, the Tai advised him to control himself in the bedroom. Mohu was not in a hurry to find a Wang Fei for him. Later on, Mohu passed away, and he observed mourning for 3 years. Thus, the dignified Prince Rong, who was already in his 20s, had not experienced the taste of men and women. Recently, the emperor had mentioned that he would bestow him with a few beautiful women. Jiang Huan had some resistance to this and thought of ways to refuse. But now, he suddenly felt that he should get a wife. He actually felt something because of a kiss from his good friend. This was really, thinking about it, his face turned red again. Chapter 389. By the time Jiang Huan finished tidying up and came out, the two of them had already forgotten about the kiss in the morning. Gu Xingyin stayed at Jiang Huan's manor for another day before saying goodbye. After all, she was an official and did not have as much freedom as Jiang Huan, a wealthy prince. Jiang Huan did not keep her any longer and only said that he was going to the palace and could go with her. It was still the same inconspicuous carriage with the same unfathomable coachman. After entering the city, Gu Xingyin got off the carriage and said goodbye to Jiang Huan before heading to the Fu residence. Jiang Huan went straight to the palace. He was still thinking about the words Gu Xingyin said to him when she was drunk. Since Princess Xu he dared to say such things, there was already a gap between the two of them. Even if they became husband and wife in the future, it would be a pair of resentful couples. He wanted to persuade his imperial brother to change his mind, so of course, he could not speak rashly. Today, he would go and sound him out first. Gu Xingyin went straight back to the residence. When the servant guarding the door saw her return, he said while packing, "General, the old general has orders for you to see him when you come back." Gu Xingyin nodded. He changed his direction and walked toward the main courtyard where old General Fu lived. "This child greets father." Gu Xingyin bowed properly. "You still know to come back. Where have you been these 2 days?" Old General Fu looked at his handsome daughter and asked sternly. She disappeared for 2 days without any reason and did not even send a message back. Did she not think that her family would be worried? This child only went to see a good friend. Gu Xingyin replied calmly. Old General Fu saw her nonchalant attitude and became angry. "Don't forget your identity. You must be careful when making friends." Gu Xingyin knew that he was emphasizing that she was a girl and did not want her identity to be exposed. To be honest, as a transmigrator who was on a mission, she was familiar with the storyline. Naturally, she knew that this old general had feelings for his daughter. However, he had always been stubborn and would never speak softly. His words of concern sounded like he was lecturing her. But while she could know and understand, Fu Yunjin could not. Hearing his father's words, Gu Xingyin suddenly laughed. He raised his head and looked straight at his father. "Father, you worry too much. Your son has been in the army for so many years and has still been doing well. Father, don't worry. I won't let the war god family's reputation be ruined by me, Fu Yunjin." Old General Fu was speechless when he saw the mockery in his daughter's eyes. He had always known that this child held a grudge against him. Yes, for the sake of the so-called glory of the family, he had selfishly decided her life. Ever since she made the decision to give birth to a young master in the general's residence, her daughter was destined to never be able to lead a normal life. His face was dejected. "You hate me." Gu Xingyin's expression didn't change. "I wouldn't dare." It wasn't that she didn't dare, but she didn't dare. Gu Xingyin retreated. Old General Fu was alone in the room. He stood there for a long time and carefully took out a scroll from a secret compartment in the study. The scroll slowly unfolded. On the slightly yellowed paper, there was a beautiful woman with a sweet smile. Looking carefully, this woman's appearance was 70% similar to Fu Yunjin's. The only difference was that the woman in the painting had a gentle smile while Fu Yunjin's eyebrows had a bit more heroic spirit. "Ah I was wrong. I was really wrong in the past." His rough hands slowly rubbed on the paper. No one could hear the old man's regret. Chapter 390. I heard that you invited Yunzhen to your manor. The emperor took a sip of tea and asked Jiang Huan with a smile. There was nothing to hide about this kind of thing, so Jiang Huan nodded. The emperor was surprised. I remember that your manor is very precious. Back then, I wanted to borrow it and use it, but you refused. Why are you so generous this time? Jiang Huan glanced at the emperor and said bluntly, last time you wanted to use my manor for those vulgar foreigners, and I entertained my friends there. How can it be the same? The emperor was surprised. His brother looked gentle, but in fact, he was very proud. He rarely looked at ordinary people. How long had he and Yunzhen known each other? Jiang Huan saw the emperor's meaning and nodded. Yunzhen and I hit it off at first sight. He remembered his purpose of entering the palace and couldn't help but ask, brother, I heard that you arranged a marriage for Yunzhen and Shuha. The emperor nodded and said with a smile, that was several years ago. My princess should be matched with such a young hero. The emperor thought of something and his eyes were full of smiles. He said, Yunzhen insisted that he didn't make a great contribution and didn't have the face to marry the princess. Fortunately, Shuha was willing to wait. Otherwise, my grandson would have run away. Jiang Huan frowned. According to Yunzhen, Shuha wasn't in a hurry to get married. It was probably not because she was considerate of Yunzhen, but because she didn't want to marry. He wanted to say something, but when he saw the emperor smile, he swallowed his words. It seemed that the emperor was very optimistic about this marriage. Forget it, I'll wait and see. When I find some evidence, I'll talk to my brother. Jiang Huan bid farewell to the emperor and was about to leave the palace. When he was halfway, he remembered that there was a black peony in the imperial garden that seemed to be blooming at this time. He couldn't help but turn and walk in that direction. Cousin, look at that peony. The beautiful woman in red looked at the tall and slender man beside her with an affectionate gaze and said with a smile. The man looked at the peony carefully and suddenly turned to the woman and said, I think that peony is beautiful, but it's far from cousin's celestial beauty. These rude words made the woman blush. The two of them chatted affectionately for a while before slowly walking into the distance. Only when the two figures disappeared did Jiang Huan walk out with an ashen face. He knew both of them. One of them was Princess Shu He, who was engaged to Yunzhen, and the other was the crown prince of Zhuge Manor. Looking at the two of them, it was clear that they had been in love with each other for a long time. No wonder Yunzhen said those words to him when he was drunk. No wonder Shuha didn't want to marry him. Jiang Huan recalled Gu Xingyin's drunken mumbling in front of him. He couldn't help but feel that it wasn't worth it for Gu Xingyin. Even though he didn't have much affection for this niece of his, he also felt a little unhappy. He no longer had the mood to admire Mo Muten. He turned his head and walked out of the palace. Your Highness, where are we going? To General Fu's residence. The blue curtain carriage rumbled in a certain direction. Gu Xingyin was practicing her spear in her courtyard. Fu Yunzhen had a habit. Every time he was in a bad mood, he would practice martial arts in the courtyard. It seemed that he could use this to vent all the resentment in his heart. She and old General Fu parted on bad terms, so she was naturally in a bad mood. Chapter 391. When Jiang Huan came, Gu Xingyin was a little surprised, but she still ordered someone to invite him over. She went to change her clothes. Xian, why are you looking for me? Gu Xingyin asked. Jiang Huan came to find Fu Yunzhen on the spur of the moment. What could he say to her? Say that he saw Shuha being intimate with someone in the imperial garden? Even if the two of them had a good relationship, it would be hurtful to say such words. Jiang Huan smiled. I came out of the palace and happened to pass by your residence, so I came in to take a look. Gu Xingyin thought that this was not the same as leaving the city, but she did not say anything. Jiang Huan, on the other hand, was very uneasy. He had a knot in his heart when he heard Fu Yunjin's drunken words, but he was not sure what his good friend was thinking. After all, many people felt that marrying a princess was an honor, even if the princess was not like an ordinary wife. He hesitated for a long time, but still asked, "Yunjin, what do you think of the marriage between Princess Shuha and he?" Gu Xingyin's expression changed subtly, and she smiled. Why did Xian suddenly think of this? Jian Huan looked at her carefully, and did not miss the unnatural expression that flashed across her face when she heard his words. "Last night, I heard Yunjin's drunken words, and I have some doubts." He simply went straight to the point. Gu Xingyin's expression changed. She looked at Jiang Huan and saw his serious expression. She knew that there was no way to fool him, and she could not help but smile bitterly. "You heard what I said. Princess Shuha came to me personally and said that she does not like me, and wants me to cancel the marriage." Gu Xingyin said lightly. "I have no interest in the princess, but this marriage itself is the grace of the emperor. How can it be cancelled just because I am unwilling?" Jian Huan could not explain what he felt in his heart. When he heard that the other party had no interest in the princess, there was a flash of secret joy in his heart. He looked at Gu Xingyin. "What if I can persuade Imperial Brother to cancel this marriage? Is Yunjin willing to give up this glory that ordinary people can't even dream of?" Gu Xingyin glanced at him. "Don't let the world rest in peace. Do you think I, Fu Yunjin, am that kind of person who covets riches and honor? Not to mention." She had a proud look on her face. "The glory that I, Fu Yunjin, want, I have to rely on my own blade and sword to fight for it on the battlefield. I don't care for things that are obtained by relying on my status as a wife." Jian Huan smiled. "That's the Fu Yunjin I know. Don't worry, I'll settle this for you." Gu Xingyin shook her head. "There's no need to trouble Xian. I'll settle this myself. Since Princess Shu he doesn't like me, I, Fu Yunjin, am not willing to warm my face and stick to the cold bench." What a joke, her goal was not just to cancel this marriage. She still remembered the assassination attempt at the city gate. If Princess Shu he wanted to let it go so easily, she would have to see if she agreed. Jian Huan frowned. He felt that this matter was not easy to solve. It would be better for him to step in. But when he saw Gu Xingyin's determined expression, he swallowed his words. Since Yunjin insisted, he would let him be. If it really did not work out, he would go and beg Imperial Brother. Gu Xingyin acted quickly. No one knew where it started, but a rumor slowly spread. The capital's pearl, Princess Shu He, had an affair with the Zhuge Duke's heir. Chapter 392. If it was purely a close relationship, with one being the beautiful princess and the other being the famous prince of the capital, everyone would probably just laugh it off. However, one of the main characters, Princess Shu He, had an engagement with General Fu Yunjin. The Fu family's reputation in the Tianyun dynasty was not lower than any other aristocratic family. Many people didn't even know who the current prime minister was or how many dukes there were, but they knew that the Fu family was the war god of the Tianyun dynasty. The Fu family had fought off countless foreign enemies for the Tianyun dynasty. Generation after generation, the Fu family had used countless amounts of blood in exchange for glory. It was an achievement that no one could erase. This kind of rumor about Fu Yunjin and Princess Shu He was naturally spread by countless people. Originally, if it was really just a rumor, Princess Shu He and Fang Mingyu wouldn't have cared, because those who really cared would have investigated it. Rumors couldn't be investigated. However, it just so happened that the things mentioned in the rumor had actually happened. The tryst in Mingyuan Temple, the silk handkerchief and knot that Princess Shu He had secretly embroidered for Fang Mingyu, the jade pendant hanging from Fang Mingyu's waist, all of these things were true. Princess Shu He panicked. She couldn't have imagined that these things, which were clearly very secretive, would be dug up by others. Of course, this was due to the system. When the rumor became more and more intense, it was impossible for the person sitting at the top to pretend not to know. Princess Shu He was summoned by the emperor. But Gu Xingyin knew that this wasn't enough. As expected, no one knew what Princess Shu He and the emperor talked about. But the rumors in the capital suddenly disappeared overnight. Princess Shu He also didn't appear in the palace for a long time, but the general's residence still hadn't received the imperial edict to cancel the marriage. Gu Xingyin received many treasures from the palace. The emperor's meaning was clear: this was the imperial family's compensation to the Fu family, but the marriage would still go on as before. Gu Xingyin pinched a pearl the size of a finger and looked at it carefully. She said carelessly, "This emperor is really generous. Even the palace treasury doesn't have many pearls of this quality." She said that it was precious, but the expression on her face was somewhat disapproving. Whenever Gu Xingyin went out these few days, she would always encounter some pitiful gazes. Gu Xingyin did not need to look to know what those gazes meant. She was just pitying him. He wasn't even married yet, but he was already wearing such a big green hat on his head. Moreover, that hat couldn't be removed. The more Gu Xingyin pretended to be indifferent on the surface, the more others thought that he was just pretending to be calm. Who knew how sad he was in private? After all, in all these years, no one had ever heard of any rumors about General Fu being a womanizer, nor had they heard of him having any female confidants. Most people thought that he respected and loved his fiancée, Princess Shu He. They never thought that he would encounter such a situation. Even the emperor specially summoned him to speak for a while. "Yunjin, I know that this matter has wronged you. I promise that this kind of thing won't happen again. I have already fiercely ordered Shu He to reflect. She has always been respectful and careful. It is normal for her to be blinded by others." In one sentence, he removed Princess Shu He from the picture and pushed all the blame onto the Zhu Guoshizhi. Chapter 393. That unlucky Zhu Guoshizhi probably would not be able to gain the emperor's favor in this lifetime. However, he was not wronged. This kind of thing could not be done unilaterally. The more others felt wronged, the happier Gu Xingyin was. This was good. She wanted everyone to be on her side and feel that Princess Shuha had wronged her. The emperor did not think much of it now. It was fine. She still had a backup plan. As long as Shuha's impression in his heart worsened, Gu Xingyin would not have to worry about whether he would cancel their marriage in the end. In the blink of an eye, 2 months passed. During this time, the border was stable. Gu Xingyin only needed to go to court every day. She was very idle. However, the emperor was probably anxious and wanted to settle the matter quickly. He directly sent an imperial edict to the Zhugua manor. "The wedding will be held on the 10th of next month." Gu Xingyin was shocked. She did not expect the emperor to be so anxious. In this dynasty, there had never been a princess's wedding that was only a month apart from the date of the imperial edict. She thought there would be at least half a year. It seemed that some of the plans that had been set before could be brought forward. However, she had not acted yet. Someone was even more anxious than her. "I heard that Imperial Brother's imperial edict has been issued. He wants you and Shuha to be married next month." Jiang Huan's expression was not good. Gu Xingyin nodded. Jiang Huan looked at her calm expression and was a bit annoyed. "Previously, I said that I could help you. You said that you could solve it yourself. Now, even the date has been set." Gu Xingyin looked at him with some surprise. She smiled and said, "Why is Shan more anxious than me? Logically speaking, I should be the one who is angry." Jiang Huan was speechless. Yes, why was he so anxious? He thought back to himself. When he learned that Imperial Brother had issued the imperial edict, he almost could not sit still. Without stopping, he ordered the carriage driver to rush to the general's manor. Where was the indifferent demeanor? But why? He asked himself, if it were someone else, if it were another friend, would he be so anxious? The answer was no. If it were someone else, he could still sit there calmly and think about how to solve the problem, instead of running over to see how Fu Yunjin was doing like a hothead. Jiang Huan didn't dare to think about what was hidden within. Fortunately, Gu Xingyin was just teasing him and did not force him to answer. She looked at Jiang Huan with a determined expression. Shirhan, every fist is my heart. Yunjin appreciates your kindness. Don't worry, I have my ways to resolve this matter. Her expression was so calm that Jiang Huan couldn't doubt the authenticity of her words. Jiang Huan looked at Gu Shengyin and did his best to resist the urge to immediately go to the palace and ask his imperial brother to retract the order. He nodded. He had to believe in Yunjin. Gu Shengyin's plan was very simple and crude. She was going to plan an assassination and then follow the clues to connect this group of assassins with the group of people at the city gate. As long as she was willing, there were countless ways for the emperor to find the mastermind. This way, she did not believe that the emperor would have the face to let Princess Shuha marry her. A princess could have a bad relationship with the prince consort, but if a princess wanted to murder an important official in court, the crime would be serious. Needless to say, although the Tianyun dynasty was a large country, the tribes of the surrounding countries had never stopped harassing the border. In the emperor's heart it was still unknown whether one of his many daughters, the princess, or her, the little war god, was more important. Chapter 394. However, Gu Xingyin didn't have time to act before the system informed her of an important matter. Is what you said true? I really didn't expect that this Princess Shu he would also have such a naive moment. Gu Xingyin exclaimed to the system. The system just told her that Princess Shu he had just been released from her confinement and thought of a way to contact the heir of Zhuguo Manor, Fang Mingyu. The two of them planned to elope. Gu Xingyin could still somewhat understand Princess Shu he's actions, but Fang Mingyu? He's willing to give up his status and identity to elope with Shu He. Could it be that his feelings were so deep that he didn't care about anything else? The answer really was yes. Gu Xingyin only felt that since Princess Shu he had put in so much effort to help her, it would be a pity if she didn't help them out. 3 days later, it was the birthday of the old princess consort of Jingan. The old princess consort's seniority was quite high, so even the emperor in the palace sent down a decree to bestow a generous gift. Princess Shu He, who had been confined for several months, also dressed up and came to the prince's estate. However, she had already discovered that she was no longer the focus of the crowd. Many noble ladies were looking at her with special gazes. She knew why. Right now, her reputation in the capital's upper-class circle was probably extremely bad. This was all thanks to him. Princess Shu he thought of the figure she faintly saw talking and laughing across the flower pond. He was dressed in white robes and had a jade belt, unbridled and unrestrained. If it wasn't for Fu Yunjin, she and her cousin could be together in a legitimate manner. Even if they were discovered, imperial father might still be able to bestow a marriage. But now, she had just been released from confinement and her cousin was also harshly punished by the Zhuguo Manor. Both of their reputations were ruined. Only this Fu Yunjin was still the general Fu that everyone respected. Why? Princess Shu He's hand was currently pinching a flower. She unconsciously used all her strength, causing the bright petals to shatter in her hand. The dark red flower juice stained her hand, but she didn't care at all. It doesn't matter. Princess Shu He comforted herself. It was better if no one paid attention to her. It would be easier to carry out her plan later. Gu Xingyin exchanged pleasantries with various familiar and unfamiliar people, but in his mind, he had the system pay attention to Princess Shu He's movements. Jiang Huan, who had been by her side, noticed her absent-mindedness and asked her what was wrong. Gu Xingyin pretended to be deep in thought and replied, I don't know why, but I have a bad premonition in my heart today. She was just joking, but Jiang Huan took it seriously. He quickly took her hand and asked, "Are you not feeling well? Do you want an imperial physician to come and take a look?" Gu Xingyin let him hold her hand. She didn't care if it was strange for two men to hold each other like this. She smiled and said, "I lied to you." She slyly leaned over to Jiang Huan's ear and whispered, "I just don't have the patience to chat with those bureaucratic people." She was half leaning on him, and her warm breath hit him. Jiang Huan subconsciously had the impulse to raise his hand and embrace this warmth. He pressed down his restless hand and said gently, "I know you don't have the patience for these twists and turns. Bear with it. When the banquet is over, we will find an excuse to leave." His tone was full of indulgence and pampering. His Highness Prince Rong and General Fu's relationship is really good. In the distance, two noble ladies looked at the two figures together. One of them sighed. The other replied, "Yes, I originally thought it was just a rumor. But the two of them like this, no matter how she looked at it, it felt a bit strange." She put her doubts in the bottom of her heart. Chapter 395. The banquet quickly came to an end. Jiang Huan remembered what he said earlier and came to find Gu Xingyin. "I just told Prince Jingan that we have some matters to attend to, so we have to leave first." At this time, the system also sent a notification, "Host, Princess Shuhi's carriage has already been prepared at the left gate of the residence." The heavens are helping me. Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up. Jiang Huan's carriage just so happened to be at the left gate. The two of them walked out of the residence. At this time, there were many carriages of high officials and nobles parked outside the residence. All of them had servants guarding them, but because there were too many people, it was a bit messy. It was likely that Princess Shu He and the others had seen through this and were preparing to leave quietly while there were many people watching. Gu Xingyin slowly walked and quickly locked onto Princess Shu He's position. If it wasn't for the system's notification, she wouldn't have discovered that this woman with a sallow complexion and coarse clothing was actually Princess Shu He, who was famous for her beauty in the capital. Coincidentally, the carriage she prepared was also an ordinary-looking carriage with blue curtains, but from the outside, it was 80% similar to Jiang Huan's carriage. Gu Xingyin suddenly stopped in her tracks and said to Jiang Huan, "I heard that Princess Consort Jingan loves flowers and that there are more exotic flowers and plants in the rear garden than in the imperial garden. There's even a stalk of Indian orchid that's the only stalk in Tianyun dynasty. I actually forgot to take a look earlier." Jiang Huan's interest was piqued. "There's such a thing?" Gu Xingyin laughed inwardly, "Then why don't we go take a look?" She pretended to inadvertently call out to Princess Shu He, who was about to get on the carriage, "You're a servant of the Prince of Jingan's residence. Do you know where the Indian orchid is located in the residence? If it's convenient, can you take us there to take a look?" Princess Shu He froze in place. She never expected that just as she was about to succeed, she would meet the person she didn't want to meet the most. Her mind raced, but on the surface, she only slightly lowered her head and said in a low voice, replying to Darren, "This servant is only a woman who does rough work." This time, this servant was commissioned by the master to go buy some ingredients and doesn't know where the Indian orchid is. "Oh," Gu Xingyin replied. Princess Shu He heaved a sigh of relief and was about to leave when she heard Gu Xingyin say with certainty, "You're lying." Princess Shu He's heart skipped a beat. As expected, Gu Xingyin continued, "You said that you are only a servant who does rough work. I see that your clothes are indeed unsightly, but your hands are fair and delicate. These are not the hands that a servant who does rough work should have. Moreover, you say that you're just a rough woman, but I can see that you're very dignified, so you're lying. You couldn't be one of the head maidservants of Prince Jing An's estate, and you secretly stole money from your master and ran away, right?" Princess Shu He's heart was in her throat. She was thinking about how to deal with it when a gentle voice came from the carriage. "She's just a servant. General Fu, don't bother with her." It was Fang Mingyu. Gu Xingyin looked at the man who came forward to help Princess Shu He out of her predicament. He was indeed a man of striking appearance. She could see that he had deep feelings for Princess Shu He. However, these two feelings were too deep. Had anyone considered Fu Yunjin's feelings? She snorted, Fong. She glanced at Jiang Huan from the corner of her eye and discovered that the other party's gaze was on Princess Shu He, who was pretending to be a servant. His brows were deeply furrowed. This meant that he was suspicious of Princess Shu He's identity. Chapter 396. Gu Xingyin calmed down and glanced at Princess Shu He carelessly. Alright, since Fang Shizi has spoken, this general will give Fang Shizi face. She turned around and pretended to leave, but Jiang Huan grabbed her arm. Jiang Huan's gaze was fixed on Princess Shu He as he said, "Come here." Princess Shu He's originally relaxed heart instantly jumped. Judging from Imperial Uncle Rong's tone, it was highly likely that he had discovered her identity. She quickly raised her head and met Fang Mingyu's eyes. The two of them saw the same message in each other's eyes, run. Princess Shu He didn't say anything else and walked towards the carriage. Fang Mingyu leaned forward and pulled her up. The coachman, who was already prepared, cracked his whip and the carriage headed towards the city gate. Guards! Stop them for me. Jiang Huan's face was as calm as water. Gu Xingyin seemed to have just realized what had happened. She looked at Jiang Huan with a trace of disbelief in her voice. That person just now, Jiang Huan couldn't bear it, but he still looked at her and said word by word, it was Shu He. Gu Xingyin's expression changed from shock to ashen. How could she not understand what had happened? Her own fiancé had eloped with someone else. This kind of humiliation was simply unbearable. She didn't want to look in the direction Fang Mingyu and Shu He had left. She only said in a hoarse voice, "I want to enter the palace." Jiang Huan knew what she wanted to do and said warmly, "I'll go with you." The two of them weren't worried about Princess Shu He at all. If the two of them really escaped right under their noses, then the imperial guards and guards in the capital could collectively commit suicide. Gu Xingyin entered the palace but didn't directly see the emperor. Instead, she knelt down outside the imperial study. Jiang Huan's heart ached when he saw this, but he also knew that this was the only way to let the emperor know his determination. He glanced at Gu Xingyin and entered the imperial study himself. "What's wrong? You've been entering the palace quite frequently recently." The emperor looked at Jiang Huan with some surprise. Jiang Huan and Gu Xingyin entered the palace at the first possible moment. News from Prince Jing'an's estate had yet to arrive. Jiang Huan was not in the mood to exchange pleasantries and said directly, "Brother, Yunjin is kneeling outside the imperial study." The emperor was shocked. "What's wrong? What happened? Let him in." Jiang Huan just shook his head. "Listen to me first." He recounted everything that had happened just now without missing a single word. At the end, he added, "In my opinion, Shu He and that Fang Mingyu, I'm afraid that they want to escape." Pa! The emperor swept the inkstone off the desk. "This evil creature." The emperor said to Jiang Huan, "Go outside and tell Yunjin to come in and report." Jiang Huan shook his head. "I'm afraid I won't be able to persuade him this time. This is too humiliating for a man. Yunjin is asking for your opinion." The emperor laughed angrily. "What? Is he threatening me?" But he thought about it again. Generals were mostly hot-blooded. When encountering such a situation, it was normal for them to express their dissatisfaction. If Fu Yunjin came to greet him as if nothing had happened, then his shrewdness would truly be frightening. With such a thing happening, even if he wanted to make Shu He and him a couple, it was probably impossible. The emperor's mind spun and he finally let out a long sigh. "I've agreed to what he wants. Let him in." Chapter 397. When Gu Xingyin saw Jiang Huan's expression, she knew what the result would be. Sure enough, Jiang Huan walked to her side and stretched out his hand. "Get up, go to the imperial study and ask for forgiveness." Gu Xingyin stood up with the strength of his hand and walked to the imperial study. She knelt down in front of the emperor standing there. "This subject is guilty." The emperor snorted, "You still know that you are guilty? How dare you threaten me?" Gu Xingyin smiled, "This subject also knows that your majesty loves this subject, so I dare to be so rebellious." Okay. The emperor waved his hand. "I know, I am sorry about the matter of Shuha. How about I see if there are any princesses of suitable age in the imperial family and compensate you with a gentle and virtuous wife?" Gu Xingyin hurriedly waved her hand. "Thank your majesty for your kindness, but this subject really doesn't have such thoughts now. This subject can't accept your majesty's kindness." If the emperor really bestowed another marriage, wouldn't her efforts be in vain? The emperor was just joking, but being rejected by a subject, he still felt uncomfortable. He glared, "Don't show up in front of me, quickly get out." So, Gu Xingyin quickly got out, and took His Highness Prince Rome with her. Jiang Huan looked at the relaxed Gu Xingyin, who didn't seem to be affected by the matter of Princess Shuha at all. Gu Xingyin replied in a good mood, "I didn't like her in the first place. They did such a shameless thing, the one who ruined their reputation is not me." She looked at Jiang Huan with bright eyes. "Why should a man worry about not having a wife? Sighing is just a woman's pretense. I, Fu Yunjin, disdain it." When she said this, her eyes were brighter than the stars in the sky, making people unconsciously believe in her words. Jiang Huan's eyes were soft. "Yes, Yunjin is so outstanding, I don't know how many young ladies from aristocratic families dream of having him." When he said this, he couldn't help but feel sour in his heart. There were so many people who could openly admire him, but he was the only one who couldn't. Wait, why do I have such thoughts? Jiang Huan was shocked. He looked at Gu Xingyin, who was smiling brightly, and the bewilderment in his heart grew. Was she actually harboring such thoughts towards Yunjin? The more Jiang Huan thought about it, the more bitter he felt. Men falling in love was going against the order of the heavens in the end, and they would suffer the curses of the world. So how could he bear to drag Yunjin into such a quagmire? Jiang Huan wished that he would never realize what kind of feelings he had for Yunjin. That way, he would be able to stay by Yunjin's side. Be careful. Gu Xingyin's words pulled his attention back. The carriage shook heavily. At the same time, a pair of hands held him firmly. What's going on? Jiang Huan regained his senses and asked the coachman outside. Your Highness, there's an assassin. Please don't come out. The coachman's muffled voice sounded. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat. This was the move that he had planted. She held Jiang Huan and got up. I'll go out and take a look. You stay inside and don't move. Jiang Huan subconsciously stopped her. Gu Xingyin smiled proudly. Xian, don't forget who I am. In this world, the person who can take my life by force has not appeared yet. After saying this, she turned over and got out of the carriage. She knocked out an assassin and removed the weapon in his hand. A group of rascals who don't know what's good for them. Chapter 398. Jiang Huan sat in the carriage, his heart filled with worry. However, he knew his own situation and did not rashly get down. Not long after, the sounds of fighting outside stopped. Gu Xingyin lifted the curtain and sat back in her clean clothes. Are you all right? Jiang Huan asked nervously. Gu Xingyin shook her head. It's just a group of motley crew. A few of them have been caught by your coachman and are going to be sent to the Supreme Court later. She lowered her eyes and hid the look in her eyes. These people were all fugitives that she had paid a great price to find. She had promised them that she would protect their wives and children for a lifetime of prosperity and safety, but the price was their lives. When they arrived at the Supreme Court, these people would reveal some information according to what she said. By the time the Supreme Court investigated, they would naturally be able to use some clues to link this assassination to the previous one. Gu Xingyin did not deny that her move was somewhat shady, but the truth was that if you were merciful, others would want your life. Jiang Huan saw that her mood was not right and thought that it was because she was in a bad mood, so he did not think much of it. As Gu Xingyin had expected, this assassination attempt actually involved Prince Rong. Jin Xingyin flew into a rage and personally ordered the Supreme Court to investigate thoroughly. When the officials of the Supreme Court received the imperial edict, they naturally did not dare to be negligent. Each of them took out 120% of their experience and treated it carefully. In addition, Gu Xingyin had already prepared the evidence. When the officials found out the truth, their hearts turned cold. Lord Zhang, this. The deputy of the Supreme Court stood at attention and looked at his superior with a face full of sweat. Since a princess was involved in this matter, they had no way to make the decision. Moreover, in this kind of situation, it was possible that His Majesty would silence the insiders to protect Princess Xu He. Lord Zhang of the Supreme Court had been in the officialdom for many years and was much calmer than Li Zheng. This matter, other than you and me, no one else is allowed to know. Now, follow me to the palace to see His Majesty. Yes. On the other side, when the Emperor heard that the matter had been investigated, he immediately summoned the officials of the Supreme Court. This is the result of your investigation. The Emperor looked at the two of them coldly. Lord Zhang's expression remained unchanged as he replied, reporting to your Majesty, this matter is highly confidential. Lord Li and I have done everything personally, and the results will be reported to your Majesty as soon as possible. As for whether it is true or false, I hope your Majesty can decide. He left the choice to the Emperor. What he meant was that this matter was not revealed to the public. Only the two of them knew about it. Even if they were given 100 guts, they would not dare to reveal anything. As for the truth, it depends on your Majesty. Whatever truth you want, it will be whatever truth you want. The Emperor looked at the two people kneeling at the foot of the steps for a long time. Killing intent flashed in his eyes, but he finally calmed down. Get up. You don't have to worry about this matter anymore. I will naturally give the general and Prince Rong an explanation. The two of them took their leave in relief. Once they were out of the door, Li Zhengkai bowed respectfully to his superior, Your Excellency is quick-witted. This humble official admires you. Lord Zhang stroked his goatee with a smile and said nothing. The Emperor entered Princess Xu He's palace with a heavy expression. Ever since Princess Xu He was caught eloping, she had been placed under house arrest in the palace by the furious Emperor. Even her birth mother, Imperial concubine Fang, was not allowed to visit. Hearing that the Emperor had arrived, Princess Xu He's eyes flashed with joy. Imperial father had always doted on her and would definitely not punish her. She tidied her clothes and went out to welcome him. Imperial father, Pa. What greeted her was a resounding slap. Chapter 399. The Emperor used a lot of strength in his anger and Princess Xu He fell to the ground. She covered half of her face. There was no need to look, it was already swollen. Imperial father. Princess Xu He looked at the Emperor in disbelief. She couldn't believe that he had just hit her without caring about his status. You really disappoint me. The Emperor looked at his daughter who was as beautiful as a flower. He had many children. Just counting the princesses, there were more than 10 of them. Among them, Princess Xu He was born in a noble family and had the most outstanding appearance out of all his daughters. He had always doted on her. However, there was a limit to an emperor's love. From what I see, I have spoiled you too much. That's why you have such an arrogant personality. The Emperor looked at Princess Xu He and said coldly. You think that Yun Zhen is climbing up the social ladder by marrying you? Go and ask all the princesses in the palace if they are willing to marry Yunzhen. I can tolerate you throwing a tantrum and being a little arrogant. My daughter should naturally be proud. However, you can't even tell what's important and what's not. The emperor looked at his daughter in disappointment. You actually dared to hire an assassin to assassinate an important official of the court and my great general of the country. Hearing this, Princess Shu He, who had been feeling wronged and confused, finally understood that what she had been worried about had happened. Imperial father knew what she had done. This made her heart sink to the bottom. She understood her imperial father. He was a true emperor. This also meant that no matter how much he doted on her, she couldn't compare to his country. She hurriedly got up and walked to the emperor's side on her knees. She tugged at his robe. Imperial father, I know I was wrong. I was just blinded by greed. I really know I was wrong. Besides, isn't General Fu fine? The emperor saw that she was still looking for excuses and his heart turned cold. 2 assassinations, did she really know she was wrong? He coldly flung away the crying Princess Shu He. Stay here and reflect. If you really know you were wrong, there will be plenty of opportunities for you to atone for the court. Humph. He snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves, and left. Imperial concubine Fang, who had rushed over after hearing the news, was first stopped outside the palace by the guards in charge of guarding Princess Shu He. She was also stopped outside when she went to ask for an audience with the emperor. Only then did she realize the importance of this matter. However, no matter how she thought about it, she could not figure out what kind of mistake her daughter had committed. Gu Xingyin was summoned to the palace by the emperor. That group of assassins entered the Supreme Court and committed suicide by taking poison one by one. They were unable to detect the mastermind behind the scenes. The emperor said apologetically to Gu Xingyin. Fortunately, His Highness Prince Rong is fine. Gu Xingyin was not surprised that the emperor had suppressed this matter. After all, if this matter was exposed, the entire imperial family would lose face. The emperor could not afford to lose face like this. That's right, I have already drafted a decree. Princess Shu He suddenly fell ill and is now recuperating in the palace of Gongquan. I'm afraid she will not be able to marry you. Your marriage will be cancelled. The emperor seemed to be a bit tired. He waved his hand at her and had her leave. Not long after Gu Xingyin returned to the Fu, she received the imperial decree from the palace as well as a large pile of rewards. This honor was so great that many people who had laughed at Fu Yunjin because of the cancellation of his marriage with the princess were speechless. Only Gu Xingyin knew that this was just another form of compensation from the emperor to her. Chapter 400. Gu Xingyin had just ordered people to carry the rewards from the palace to the warehouse when she saw the old housekeeper. Father, why is he looking for me? The old housekeeper had always been by old General Fu's side. Now that he came to find her, Gu Xingyin didn't have to think of other possibilities. Father. Gu Xingyin came to old General Fu's study. The old housekeeper considerately closed the door, leaving the father and daughter some private space. Tell me honestly, what happened? His Majesty can't give so many rewards to our family for no reason. Old General Fu looked at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin didn't think so, didn't it say in the imperial edict? Princess Shuha contracted a serious disease and our marriage was cancelled. This is the compensation from the royal family. Old General Fu impatiently interrupted her. I want to hear the truth. The royal family's excuse might be able to fool ordinary people, but for people like them, they knew that something must have happened. Gu Xingyin suddenly gave a short laugh and looked at his father with a strange gaze. Do you really want to know? Old General Fu looked at his daughter and frowned. Then I will tell you the truth. It was because Princess Shuha didn't want to marry me. The last time I came back victorious, the assassination at the city gate was her doing. Old General Fu squeezed the teacup in his hand so hard that a crack appeared. He had thought of many possibilities, but he didn't expect it to be like this. You. He looked at his daughter with a dry throat, but he didn't know what to say. In the end, he was also at fault. If it wasn't for his mistake, his daughter wouldn't have to suffer so much. Gu Xingyin stood there quietly. She was waiting for old General Fu to say something. She knew that the real Fu Yunjin was also waiting for her whole life. She didn't know what she wanted to hear. Maybe it was the affirmation from her father, or maybe it was the late regret of her father, or maybe it was something else. However, Fu Yunjin's life was too short. In the end, she didn't get what she wanted. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt a strong sense of sorrow in her heart. She was shocked. This was not what she should be feeling. The system gave the answer in time. This is the instinct that the original owner, Fu Yunjin, engraved in the depths of his body. The host was slightly affected for a while. Gu Xingyin had also heard that hosts like them who were doing quests, such as herself, possessed the body of the original host. It was equivalent to living a new life in their place. The original host's soul had long since melted away. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be able to affect the host at all. However, humans were, after all, one of the most mysterious races in the world. Their feelings were also the most complicated and difficult to understand. Just like now, the real Fu Yunjin had died long ago in her previous life, but some deep obsession remained in her body. Unless she got an answer, she would never be able to get rid of it. As long as it didn't affect the mission, Gu Xingyin didn't mind helping these hosts complete their obsessions. However, after waiting for a long time, she still didn't hear old General Fu's words. Gu Xingyin looked at him coldly. Old General Fu clearly had regret in his heart, but because of his personality and his face, he couldn't say a word of apology to his daughter. She decided to give him a strong dose of medicine. Chapter 401. Father, look at me, Gu Xingyin said. Old General Fu was a little surprised. After his daughter became sensible, their relationship became very bad. She was rarely willing to take the initiative to start a conversation. Gu Xingyin said slowly, actually, when I was very young, I admired you very much. Her eyes were a little empty, as if she had returned to a distant childhood. I remember that you were still very young at that time. Although you were still so serious, I wanted to be close to you. Because I felt that you were very powerful, and other people's fathers couldn't compare to you. Although from then on, you started to make me learn the horse stance, run in the snow in winter in a thin layer of clothes, and drive piles. I felt very wronged, but I still gritted my teeth and persevered. Because when I did these things, I hoped that I could do my best, and then you would praise me. But in the end, I knew that I would never be able to satisfy you. Even if my spear skills could beat all my peers, even if I could exceed the quota set by you every day, I still couldn't satisfy you at all. Because I'm not the heir you expected, because I'm a girl. Gu Xingyin's eyes seemed to be burning with a blazing fire. It was so bright that it was frightening. From the moment I learned about the difference between men and women, I understood my life's fate. When the other girls were in groups, admiring the flowers and reciting poems, calling their friends to go on a cruise, admiring the moon, dressing up beautifully and going out to play, I was working hard bit by bit, wanting to do better. I didn't ask for much. I just wanted you to give me an affirmation and smile at me. Tell me that even if I'm just a girl, I won't be worse than any man. But I didn't. Gu Xingyin suddenly smiled, but her eyes were red. I know that you don't like me. Sometimes, when I see the enemy's sword on the battlefield, I even think about not dodging and just letting it cut my body. Why should I bear so much? I can't enjoy the slightest bit of relaxation and happiness in my life. Why should I live for Fu Yunjin in the eyes of others? But you won, father. The ideas you instilled in me since I was young made it impossible for me to escape and end everything with death, which is like a coward's behavior. I can't let go of the Fu clan's century-old reputation. I can't let go of the Tianyun dynasty's border soldiers. I knew that my life would be like this. Enough. Old General Fu had never thought that his daughter would have such thoughts. He was strict with her and never smiled. It was never because she was a girl. This daughter of his had always been his pride. Ever since she had grown up, he had been seeing her less and less. It wasn't because he didn't like her, but every time he saw his daughter's face that resembled his late wife's, the guilt in his heart made him feel too ashamed to face his daughter. He never knew that this child had so many worries hidden in her heart. He also didn't know that there was such a big misunderstanding between father and daughter. The huge sorrow in his heart almost made him unable to stand. Looking at his daughter who was stubbornly looking at him, the wall in old General Fu's heart collapsed. I was wrong. He finally spoke the words that had been hidden in his heart for many years. Chapter 402. Old General Fu looked at his daughter. After saying those words, the stone that had been pressing down on his heart for decades was finally removed. It has nothing to do with you. It's all my fault. Old General Fu's expression became calm again as he looked at his daughter. For so many years, I've always felt that you hated me. I'm afraid that you didn't want to see me. That's why I never told you. You have always been my proudest daughter. I didn't want to see you, not because I didn't want to see you, but because I felt that I wasn't a qualified father. I didn't have the face to face you. Old General Fu and Fu Yunjin, the father and daughter, finally had their first long talk in 24 years. That night, Gu Xingyin came to Jiang Huan's residence. Drink with me. Gu Xingyin only said one sentence to him. Jiang Huan intuitively realized that something big must have happened to Gu Xingyin, but looking at her appearance, he didn't ask much. He just ordered the servants to quickly prepare a table of good dishes and bring out the old wine from the residence. Gu Xingyin poured cup after cup of wine into her mouth. Her expression was both sad and happy. Old General Fu's words just now didn't have much effect on Gu Xingyin, but for Fu Yunjin's body, it overturned her 24 years of understanding. So at this moment, her mood was very agitated. She just wanted to find someone to get drunk and then fall into a deep sleep. For Gu Xingyin, her lover was undoubtedly the best choice. She could reveal everything in front of him without any scruples. Jiang Huan kept silent as he watched Gu Xingyin raise her head and drink until her eyes began to blur with drunkenness. He raised his hand to stop Gu Xingyin's hand from raising the wine cup. Enough, Yunjin, you are drunk. But with Gu Xingyin's skills, how could he stop him? With a flip of his hand, he cleverly broke free from Jiang Huan's restraint. In the blink of an eye, he downed another cup of wine. No, no, no. I'm happy. Gu Xingyin looked at Jiang Huan with a smile and winked at him mysteriously. You know what? I always thought that he didn't like me, but today, he told me that he was so cold and strict to me because he felt sorry for me. Gu Xingyin snorted and laughed, telling Jiang Huan these things without a care. Actually, as a member of the Fu family, I don't think it is bad to shoulder the responsibility of the Fu family. Why didn't he tell me earlier? Jiang Huan listened in silence. From her words, he could guess that Gu Xingyin was talking about his father, old General Fu. The relationship between old General Fu and his only son, Fu Yunjin, was not a secret in the capital. In public, the father and son treated each other coldly. However, from Gu Xingyin's words, there seemed to be more to it than meets the eye. Jiang Huan did not ask. In his heart, he knew that Yunjin just wanted to find someone to talk to and did not need his answer. But he did not expect that Gu Xingyin would throw such a shocking news at him. All these years, I worked so hard and risked my life, wasn't it just to get his affirmation? Just to let him know that I, as a daughter, am not worse than any man. He actually said that he doesn't care about this. Clang! Jiang Huan's hand trembled and the cup in his hand fell on the table. Some of the remaining wine in the cup fell on his lapel, but he was not in the mood to care about this. Chapter 403. He looked at Gu Xingyin in shock. For a moment, he even wondered if he had been intoxicated by the fragrance of the wine. It was as if he was hallucinating. Yunjin. Jiang Huan could clearly hear his heartbeat beating like a drum. He tried to keep his voice calm. Gu Xingyin raised her eyes and looked at him with some effort. Looking at her, Jiang Huan felt that there was something wrong with his good friend. Her skin was so fair and delicate. Her facial features were so delicate that she did not look like a man's. When she looked at people with drunken eyes, she was charming and seductive. There were so many flaws. Why was it that he had never doubted his identity for so long? In the end, it was because the fact that old General Fu raised his daughter as a man was too unbelievable. It was also because he went to the battlefield at the age of 15. For 9 years, he cleared all doubts with his military achievements. How could such a person be a woman? You said earlier that you are a woman. Jiang Huan decided to verify with Gu Xingyin. At this moment, he was very glad that he had already ordered all the servants to leave. Gu Xingyin was completely free at this time. When she heard Jiang Huan's question, she nodded seriously, yes. She looked up at Jiang Huan and suddenly grinned, you don't believe it, do you? She nodded. That's true. If it were me, I probably wouldn't believe it either. As she spoke, she actually stood up shakily and reached out to pull her belt. Let me show you. Jiang Huan was stunned. He quickly stood up and stopped her. This person was very different from her usual self when drunk. Thinking of Gu Xingyin's behavior when she was drunk twice, Jiang Huan was even more determined to keep an eye on her in the future. He would not let her have the chance to get drunk in front of others. He was being kind, but Gu Xingyin did not appreciate his kindness at all. Don't stop me, I. She struggled to break free from Jiang Huan's grasp and successfully pulled out the belt in her hand. Her originally neat outer robe instantly loosened, revealing the snow-white inner robe underneath. Only then did Jiang Huan realize that the body hidden under the outer robe was indeed excessively slender. He helplessly looked at the drunkard. His heart was filled with endless joy, but he didn't want to take advantage of her in such a situation. Once again, he walked forward, covered her with the robe, and softly coaxed her, I believe that Yun Zhen is a woman, but a woman can't casually take off her clothes in front of others. Jiang Huan finally understood his feelings and realized that he had fallen in love with a man, and that man was his good friend. Jiang Huan, who had been suffering all this time, felt redeemed by the heavens today. He looked at the person in front of him and his heart was filled with emotions. He just wanted to hug her tightly in his arms and bite her red lips so that the two of them would never be separated again. However, he had always been a gentleman and was unwilling to take advantage of others. He wanted to be a gentleman, but Gu Xingyin wasn't willing to give him the chance. Gu Xingyin listened to him and nodded very seriously, I know, a woman's body can't be seen by others, only by the person she likes. She raised her head, and the corners of her eyes, which were red because of the alcohol, had an indescribable charm. She reached out and wrapped her arms around the neck of the person in front of her. Slowly, her body moved closer to him, and her breath smelled like orchids, but I like Xian, and I want to show it to you. Today, 20,000 words were sent. This was all the chapters that Gigi had saved for the past 3 months, and it was also the last time that she would update. After that, she would update 8,000 to 10,000 words every day in the morning. Mwah, good night everyone. Then, I recommend my super good friend Huan Chu's Transmigration System, Guide to Prince Charming. It's a very good book. Chapter 404. Gu Xingyin woke up very early the next day. She felt that something was wrong the moment she woke up, so she didn't open her eyes. Gu Xingyin's mind raced. Scenes flashed through her mind, and she finally understood what she had done last night. After she got drunk, she not only confessed her details clearly, but also packed herself up and sent herself out. When she thought of something, she couldn't help but breathe erratically. She felt the arm around her waist tighten its grip. At the same time, a familiar voice came from above her head, "Good morning, Yunjin." Jiang Huan's voice was very normal, without much awkwardness, which calmed Gu Xingyin a lot. She secretly despised herself. How many lives have I experienced? How can I not be as calm as my lover who has no reincarnation memory? Thinking of this, she looked over and met Jiang Huan's smiling eyes. "Good morning, Xian." Aware that the hand behind her back was slowly moving, Gu Xingyin blinked and said, "I'm going to see my father today. I ran out yesterday, so he probably feels uneasy." The man's intention couldn't be more obvious. Although Fu Yunjin's body was good, it was his first time after all, and he couldn't withstand another ravaging. Who would have thought that Jiang Huan, who looked so weak, was actually so strong in some aspects? Jiang Huan sighed. He had a soft body in his arms, and it was the first time he had tasted it. It was impossible to say that he didn't want it. But looking at Gu Xingyin's appearance, he knew that he couldn't force her. He withdrew his hand and watched as Gu Xingyin got up and put on her clothes without any hesitation. When Gu Xingyin finished putting on her clothes, she turned around and found that Jiang Huan had also finished dressing. Jiang Huan looked at her and suddenly sighed, "I don't know when I'll be able to draw Yunjin's eyebrows." Gu Xingyin was silent. She was now a man, so of course, she couldn't put on makeup, draw eyebrows, and paste flowers on her face. Jiang Huan's wish might never come true. Looking at her, Jiang Huan suddenly realized what he had said. He stepped forward and gently wrapped his arms around Gu Xingyin's waist from behind. "Don't think too much. I just said it casually." In fact, Gu Xingyin was not sad at all. When she heard her lover's comforting words, she was still in the mood to joke. "You are the dignified Prince Rong. As long as you open your mouth, many women would be willing to let you draw their eyebrows for them even if they don't want their status." Jiang Huan frowned and tightened his grip on Gu Xingyin. He said in a deep voice, "Yunjin, don't ever say such things again. Since I, Jiang Huan, have decided on you for my entire life, there will be no one else." Gu Xingyin knew that he was her lover, so she had confidence in him. But when he heard these words, he couldn't help but feel touched. Fu Yunjin's true identity could not be revealed to the public. Otherwise, the Fu family would be accused of deceiving the emperor. If Jiang Huan chose to be with her, then it was very likely that their relationship could not be made public for the rest of their lives. He could not marry and have children. He was bound to face pressure from the outside world and even the imperial family. Gu Xingyin felt that she was being very selfish. She knew that this was very unfair to Jiang Huan. But she couldn't bear that her lover had another woman. What's more, she was not the kind of woman who liked to be paranoid and sad. She knew how deep her lover's feelings for her were. She had enough confidence that in Jiang Huan's eyes, there was no room for other women. Chapter 405. Gu Xingyin did not stay in Jiang Huan's courtyard for long. She tried her best to ignore the slight discomfort in her body and sat in Jiang Huan's carriage to return to the Fu residence. As she expected, her father did not sleep for the entire night. For the first time, the father and daughter did not treat each other coldly and had a harmonious lunch in silence. The old housekeeper watched from the side with tears in his eyes. For so many years, he had seen the old general silent and the young miss sad. He had never thought that he would be able to see the two of them bury the hatchet in his lifetime. At the end of the month, the Di Rong tribe invaded the northwest. Gu Xingyin was ordered by the emperor to lead the army to battle. The night before departure, Jiang Huan came to the general's residence and poured a cup of wine for her. "I wish you a victorious return." Gu Xingyin smiled and nodded. As the female lead of this world, Fu Yunjin was loved by the laws of fortune. Her title of invincible was not false. She looked at her lover's increasingly rosy face. Ever since Jiang Huan took the medicine she took from the system, his body had improved a lot. The vitality that he had lost due to his congenital deficiency had also been replenished. Gu Xingyin departed in the 10th month. In the 11th month of the 20th year of Changsheng, there was a report of victory from the army. General Fu led the army to capture the enemy's commander alive. At the end of the 11th month, there was another piece of news. The Tianyun dynasty's army had launched a surprise attack on the enemy's court and taken the head of King Di Rong. During the emperor's birthday in the 12th month, Fu Yunjin brought the soldiers back to the court and presented a congratulatory gift, a contract in which Di Rong swore to be an eternal vassal. It also included the new King Di Rong's wish to be eternally united with the Tianyun dynasty for 100 years. The emperor was very happy and issued a decree on the spot to confer Fu Yunjin the title of General Marquis. She was first rank and enjoyed the salary of a Junwan. After this decree was issued, matchmakers came to the general's residence to propose marriage. Everyone knew that the General Marquis was greatly favored by the emperor. At such a young age, he was already a high-ranking official. In the future, he would be even more fortunate. Now that his engagement with Princess Xu he was cancelled, he was the best candidate for a son-in-law in the eyes of the nobles. Of course, these people were all politely rejected by General Fu. Fu Yunjin, on the other hand, had been used as a pretext by Jiang Huan because of this matter. "You're quite popular these days." Jiang Huan opened his mouth and bit Gu Xingyin's fair shoulder. Gu Xingyin gasped and said unsteadily, "Are you a dog?" Jiang Huan chuckled, but his lower body did not stop moving. Gu Xingyin had no choice but to cling to him tightly. "I'm a dog, and I'm here to bite you, the delicious cake." The rest of the words were left unspoken. At the beginning of the next year, the palace issued a decree to confer the title of Princess Duanjing to represent the Tianyun dynasty in a political marriage with Di Rong. As soon as the imperial edict came out, there was an uproar everywhere. Everyone knew about this kind of political marriage. It had always been those princesses who were not favored by the emperor. Sometimes, the emperor would even feel sorry for his own daughter and choose a girl of the right age from the imperial family to be conferred as a princess. As for Princess Xu, no matter how much everyone thought about it, they still couldn't understand why the emperor would send his beloved daughter to Di Rong's bitter and cold place for a political marriage. It was said that Consort Fong fainted when she heard the news. When she woke up, she went to the emperor's palace and knelt for a long time, hoping that the emperor would take back the decree. However, even after she knelt for an entire day and night and was carried away by the eunuchs due to exhaustion, the emperor did not change his mind. In the 3rd month of the 21st year of Changsheng, Princess Duanjing led the grand political marriage procession and set off for Di Rong. Chapter 406. Fu Yunjin, the god of war in the hearts of the Tianyun dynasty's citizens. He started on the battlefield at the age of 15 and became a sharp sword in the hands of the emperor. In 20 years, he led the soldiers of the Tianyun dynasty to expand their territory. He participated in hundreds of wars, big and small, without a single defeat. He truly created an undefeatable legend. No one questioned his title as the god of war. In the end, under his leadership, the Tianyun dynasty swept through all the surrounding countries, allowing the Tianyun dynasty to complete its great undertaking of unification. He was a smart person and chose to retire when his reputation was at its peak. The emperor urged him to stay again and again, but he was not moved to retire. In the end, the emperor personally wrote an edict, conferring him the title of King General and bestowing him with countless treasures. This King General had never taken a wife in his life. There were rumors that he once met a woman he loved in the war, but that woman later died in order to save him. The king general was deeply in love with her and did not marry for the rest of his life. Some people said that he missed his former fiancée, Princess Duanjing of the Yuan family's Rong from 10 years ago, so he did not take a wife. There were also rumors that this king general was actually gay and had no interest in women. There were all kinds of rumors, but the king general was very carefree and never stood out to refute them. When someone discovered that the king general had not appeared for many days, a servant of the king general's residence came out and said that their king had finally relieved himself of a heavy burden. Now that the world was at peace, it was only right for him to travel and see the great rivers and mountains. No one knew that King Rong, who rarely appeared in front of people because of his poor health, was also traveling with him. In a small town in Jiangnan far away from the capital, a young couple suddenly moved in. The man stood tall like a pine tree and was extraordinarily handsome. The woman's facial features were bright and beautiful. Her every frown and smile was occasionally fierce, different from the style of a normal woman. This small town was very far from the city. The most important people the townspeople had seen were the country gentry in the town. When had they seen such a graceful person? At first, they only watched from afar. Later, they saw that the two did not put on airs and seemed to want to live here for a long time, so they slowly became familiar with them. It was said that this young master's name was Zhang Xian, and he was from a wealthy merchant family in the capital. He liked the environment in Jiangnan, so he brought his wife here to settle down. This young master Jiang was, of course, Jiang Huan. His wife was Gu Xingyin, who was now traveling the world. In the morning, Gu Xingyin sat in front of the bronze mirror. The man beside her was holding an eyebrow pencil, carefully drawing the outline of her brows. Now, I can finally draw Yinjin's eyebrows. After finishing the last stroke, Jiang Huan put down the brush and pulled her into his arms. Gu Xingyin glanced sideways at the mirror. Their silhouettes overlapped in the mirror, snuggling up to each other as they enjoyed each other's company. In the winter of the 34th year of Changsheng, someone suddenly knocked on the door of General Fu's residence in the capital. An unfamiliar man was holding a baby in his arms. In his arms was a letter personally written by the General Fu Yunjin. The letter clearly stated that the child was born while he was traveling. The child's mother had an accident and it was inconvenient for him to take the child with him. Therefore, he asked someone to bring the child back home and let his father raise the child on his behalf. Old General Fu, who was almost 60 years old, looked at the familiar child and burst into tears for a moment. He named the child Fu Suixin. It meant that he hoped that he could live freely and unrestrained. His daughter had finally obtained her own happiness. Chapter 407. General, you're awake. A gentle voice sounded. A figure in a huge hibernation chamber opened her eyes, glanced at the person beside her, and nodded. There was no sign of sleepiness on her face. She got up and walked to the large display screen. Behind her, the person who woke her up looked at her with an inexplicable expression. This was a very handsome woman. Using the adjective handsome to describe a woman was usually not very appropriate, but it was incomparably appropriate to use on this woman. It was said that men in military uniforms were the most handsome. This sentence was also applicable to women. The close-fitting design of the Empire's military uniform outlined her tall and straight figure meticulously. Under her neatly trimmed short hair was a perfect androgynous face. Her pair of emotionless brown eyes were enough to make most of the Empire's citizens fall head over heels for her. This time, the mission world Gu Xingyin came to was different from the past. The Great Milky Way era was 1003. Humans had entered the era of super technology. The planet they lived on was no longer enough to satisfy them. The entire Milky Way, or even the more distant and unpredictable interstellar, was their goal to conquer. Today's humans could strengthen their genes through various genetic repair fluids to obtain strong abilities and vitality. The average lifespan of humans had been extended to 500 years. Of course, some of the strong people standing at the top had even longer lifespans. For example, Gu Xingyin's body this time, the only female general of the Galaxy Empire, Situ Jin. The Galaxy Empire was one of the two major forces in the Milky Way. Its counterpart was the Interstellar Federation, which was known as a liberal democracy. Situ Jin was born into a political family in the Galaxy Empire. However, she was not interested in politics. At the age of 18, she entered the Empire Military Academy on her own. 5 years later, she graduated with an SSS grade and directly entered the Violent Lion Legion, one of the 3 ace legions of the Empire. For the next 20 years, she climbed up step by step until last year, when she was personally awarded the Medal of Honor by the Emperor of the Galaxy Empire and became the commander of the Violent Lion Legion. In the Empire, besides the Marshal, the highest ranks were the commanders of the 3 ace legions, which were the 3 generals of the Empire. Not only was Situ Jin the only commander, but he was also the youngest general in the history of the Empire. The people of the Empire were guessing that if this continued, Situ Jin would very likely become the first female marshal since the establishment of the Galaxy Empire. However, Situ Jin was unable to continue. The reason was because of the gentle adjutant standing behind her, Lin Qi. As Situ Jin's adjutant, Lin Qi was Situ Jin's confidant and one of the people she trusted the most in the world. However, the person she trusted the most had betrayed her during the war between Situ Jin and the Federation. Situ Jin had died in the battle against the Empire and the Federation. She was also the highest-ranking commander who had died on the battlefield during the 1,000-year conflict between the Empire and the Federation. The Emperor was furious, and the small skirmishes between the two sides became white-hot. From then on, both sides began to fight to the death. The war spread to the entire galaxy, and the entire Milky Way fell into chaos. That's a story for another day. Gu Xingyin, who had read the plot, knew that her adjutant wasn't called Lin Qi at all. It wasn't a coincidence that she came to the Violent Lion Legion and became her adjutant. She had planned it step by step. Chapter 408. Lin Qi's real name was Qi Lin. Her father was a soldier of the Federation, and her mother was an ordinary person of the Empire. Although the Empire and the Federation didn't have a good relationship, intermarriage wasn't a rare thing. However, Qi Lin's father had lost his life in the last war between the Federation and the Empire. Originally, her father didn't have to die. When the Federation army saw that the situation was hopeless, they chose to surrender. However, at that time, the commander of the Violent Lion Legion, Situ Jin, had given the order to not leave anyone alive. That was why her father still died after surrendering. This was the news Qi Lin had obtained after investigating for a long time. Because of this, she hated Situ Jin. She concealed her identity and prepared for a long time. Finally, after careful planning, she came to Situ Jin's side and became her adjutant, obtaining her trust. The original Situ Jin didn't understand until her death why her adjutant betrayed her. However, when Gu Xingyin found out, she only felt sorrow. Not only for Situ Jin, but also for Qi Lin. Situ Jin had given the order to not leave anyone alive, but that was because the army Qi Lin's father was in wasn't an ordinary Federation army. They were a secret organization of the Federation that specialized in human experiments. Their methods were extremely cruel and seriously violated the Interstellar Convention jointly promulgated by the various forces of the Milky Way. Situ Jin had been ordered to destroy all of this. Because the truth wasn't suitable to be announced, the public thought that this was just an ordinary small-scale war. Qi Lin had always thought that her father was a hero. In order to avenge him, she didn't hesitate to do so many things. In that battle, not only did Situ Jin die, but the Violent Lion Legion's Third Fleet was almost completely wiped out. This was all caused by Qi Lin. Because of this alone, Gu Xingyin couldn't tolerate her. The two were now on the Violent Lion Legion's largest command ship, Star Wing. Situ Jin represented the Galaxy Empire and headed to a neutral force in the northern part of the Milky Way, Storm Chamber of Commerce. The Storm Chamber of Commerce didn't belong to any force. It occupied a planet by itself. It was said that the leader of the Chamber of Commerce had some unclear relationship with the two largest forces in the Milky Way, the Galaxy Empire and the Interstellar Federation. Therefore, it had always existed peacefully. As for the other smaller forces, it wasn't that they didn't have any ideas about the Windstorm Chamber of Commerce. It was just that a neighboring principality had clamored to occupy the Windstorm Chamber of Commerce the day before, and the next day, the royal family had changed, so no one dared to have any ideas about it. As a member of the Empire, Gu Xingyin knew that the reason why the Storm Chamber of Commerce was able to stand tall was not because they had people in both the Empire and the Federation, but because they relied on their own backers. Major Lin Qi, she suddenly said. Qi Lin was looking at Gu Xingyin from behind. She was startled when Gu Xingyin called out to her. She didn't know why, but she had a bad premonition. She smiled and said, "Sir General, what can I do for you?" Gu Xingyin turned around and looked at her intently. He said in a deep voice, "I want to know, why did you change your appearance and try so hard to come to my side?" Qi Lin. As soon as she finished speaking, Qi Lin's expression changed. From Gu Xingyin's words, she only knew that there was a problem with her identity. She didn't know the inside story. However, Qi Lin knew that with the Empire's powerful intelligence network, if they really wanted to investigate, her details would appear in Situ Jin's database in less than an hour. Chapter 409. General. Qi Lin's expression changed, and she said, "I've always admired you, but my birth can't pass the Violent Lion Legion's inspection." She decided to confess with a half-truth. "I'm sure you know that my father was a federal soldier, and my galactic pass says that I'm a federal citizen. With such an identity, it's impossible for me to get close to you, so I used a little trick." She knew that unless an S-level secret investigation was launched, the things she did in private wouldn't be enough to be unearthed. As long as she dealt with it properly, Qi Lin comforted herself that nothing would go wrong. Oh. Gu Xingyin's expression didn't change. She still spoke calmly, but her words were like thunder exploding in Qi Lin's ears. "I thought you spent so much effort to sneak into the Violent Lion Legion and come to my side to avenge your father." Qi Lin suddenly raised her head and looked at the person in front of her. She was still expressionless, but Qi Lin seemed to see a faint mockery in her cold gaze. The general knew everything about her. Qi Lin felt helpless. Everything about her so-called revenge plan had to be built on a foundation to succeed, and that was Situ Jin's trust. If Situ Jin no longer trusted her, then she would just be a small adjutant, and those plans would be an extravagant hope. This was also the reason why Gu Xingyin chose to lay her cards on the table. The difference between Qi Lin and Situ Jin was too great. Gu Xingyin didn't need to spend much effort on her. Without Situ Jin's trust, Qi Lin wouldn't have been able to do anything on the Violent Lion Legion's battleship, which was strictly disciplined and well-guarded. Qi Lin saw that her goal was exposed, so she didn't say anything else. She sneered and looked at Gu Xingyin. "Since you already know my goal, why are you pretending to be confused?" "That's right, I, Qi Lin, came to the Violent Lion Legion to seek justice for my father who died in vain. What I want is your life, Situ Jin." Gu Xingyin's expression remained indifferent. Even when Qi Lin said those words, she was not moved at all. She looked at the agitated Qi Lin as though she was looking at a clown. "Senior Colonel Shen, come to the command center." She ignored Qi Lin and called for her other trusted aide, the captain of the Violent Lion Legion's First Fleet. "Sir General." Shannon came very quickly. He was a very handsome and charming man. If it wasn't for the military uniform and badge on his body, no one would have thought that he was the rumored First Fleet captain of the Violent Lion Legion, the most belligerent. Shannon sensed the unusual atmosphere in the command room as soon as he entered. He bowed to Gu Xingyin and stood quietly by the side, waiting for further instructions. Shannon, tell Major Lin Qi who our opponents were in the battle in the northern Green Plains 3 years ago. Shannon was shocked. He was one of the few people who knew about the secret mission. He was one of the few people who knew about it. This was a military secret. Shannon glanced at Gu Xingyin. A soldier obeying orders had the upper hand. He slowly told her what happened 3 years ago. Impossible. My father was a glorious federal soldier. How could he be one of those crazy experimenters you speak of? Qi Lin couldn't accept this at all. If what Shannon said was true, then wouldn't all the beliefs he had all along become a joke? Chapter 410. Gu Xingyin looked at her exhausted figure on the ground and pressed a button. Soon, a few fully armed soldiers walked over and saluted Gu Xingyin. General. Gu Xingyin lifted her chin slightly and looked at Qi Lin. This person's background is very suspicious. I suspect that she deliberately approached the core command group of the Violent Lion Legion and has other motives. Take her to the Empire's military court. The soldiers clearly knew this adjutant who was highly regarded by the general. They were shocked when they heard this. However, as professional soldiers, they would not disobey their superiors' orders. They obeyed the order and took the person away. After knowing that Qi Lin was taken away, Shannon asked his superior, General, what happened? Gu Xingyin looked at this partner who had accompanied Situ Jin for more than 10 years. Her expression softened. The battle you mentioned just now, Qi Lin is the descendant of one of the soldiers. She came to take revenge on the Violent Lion Legion. Shen An's expression changed. There was a trace of disgust in his eyes. He sneered. Those inhumane people. Lin Qi. Qi Lin still has the face to talk about revenge. She might not know that the Violent Lion Legion's operation was tacitly approved by the Federation President. The Federation President and the Prime Minister had different political views. Both sides were constantly fighting for the right to speak in politics. The reason why the Empire's operation had gone so smoothly was also due to the efforts of the Federation President. Gu Xingyin shook her head. I suspect that she doesn't know anything at all. She probably came here to take revenge because she was bewitched by others. Let's wait for the results of the military court. After dealing with Qi Lin, Gu Xingyin did not feel much more relaxed. She knew that Qi Lin alone could not have made such a thorough plan to come to Situ Jin's side step by step. There must be someone behind her controlling everything. Moreover, that person might have his own influence in the military. Moreover, to Situ Jin, that person did not come with good intentions. As Qi Lin's revenge plan in the storyline succeeded, the mastermind behind it did not appear. Therefore, the system could not reveal any information beyond the storyline to Gu Xingyin. Forget it, let's take it one step at a time. Since Qi Lin had already been exposed, the other party should not have the ability to plant a new nail in the Violent Lion Legion in the short term. After 1 day and 1 night, the fleet from the Violent Lion Legion arrived at the planet where the Storm Chamber of Commerce was located, Storm Star. Gu Xingyin was a general of the Galaxy Empire. Her status was even higher than that of the lords of some small planets. Naturally, the group received a personal reception from the Windstorm Chamber of Commerce's president. It said that General Situ is a hag. Some natives of Storm Planet, who had only heard of Gu Xingyin's reputation, whispered. I don't know. Other than the war, I rarely hear any rumors about this lord. The military kept the information of the generals strictly confidential. When they appeared, all kinds of surveillance equipment were activated. Even if it was taken, it would be destroyed. Unlike the men, many women from Storm Star also stood here today, wanting to see the first female general of the Empire. Situ Jean had countless fans in the Milky Way. Even if most people had never seen her face, they did not reject the fact that this legendary figure was their idol. Chapter 411. The enormous Starhawk slowly landed on Storm Star, and rows of orderly soldiers walked down from the warship. Thomas, the head of the Storm Chamber of Commerce, was envious. He knew how terrifying these silent soldiers could be in battle. Immediately, everyone turned to look at the cabin door. A tall figure walked out and walked down the stairs of the warship step by step. Tap, tap, tap. This was the sound of military boots stepping on the ground. When their commander passed by, the soldiers on both sides stretched out their right hands and performed a standard military salute. The wind blew up her dark green windbreaker. Gu Xingyin didn't have any extra expression on her face as she walked straight to the president of the Storm Chamber of Commerce. Before she could say anything, her expression suddenly froze. The next moment, the dagger at her waist was unsheathed and accurately blocked somewhere. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rang out. At the same time, Gu Xingyin withdrew her left hand. Not far away, there was the sound of a dull object falling to the ground. Without needing her to say anything, the soldiers behind her consciously ran in that direction. President Thomas, the security and defense of Storm Star still needs to be strengthened. Gu Xingyin calmly looked at the president of the Storm Chamber of Commerce, whose expression had become quite unsightly since the scene just happened. Seeing this extremely imposing woman neatly put the dagger that had blocked the bullet back to her waist, President Thomas put away the shock in his heart and sincerely apologized. "I'm really sorry that this happened. Your Excellency, the Storm Chamber of Commerce will definitely give you a satisfactory explanation." Gu Xingyin nodded slightly and walked into the Storm Chamber of Commerce under Thomas's lead. Outside, the crowd of people who had just recovered from the shock were left. Just now, were my eyes playing tricks on me? Someone actually used a dagger to block a bullet? You're not playing tricks on your eyes, but isn't the main point that Storm Star received an assassination attempt the moment Her Excellency arrived? No, no, no. Isn't the main point that Her Excellency isn't a hag and is actually so handsome? Yes, yes, yes. If a woman can grow up to look like Her Excellency Situ, I would also be willing to marry her. A girl wearing a cute puffy skirt said with longing in her eyes. In the middle of the heated discussion, a man with short red hair stood out. Not only because of his pure red hair, but also because of the careless smile on his extremely handsome face. I like a cold and handsome woman. His eyes flashed with interest, but his words made the subordinates behind him break out in a cold sweat. Sir, she's a general of the Empire. You. The man behind him hesitated. The red-haired man glanced at him. What's wrong with being a general of the Empire? Don't generals of the Empire need to date? I'm such a handsome and charming man, how could she not like me? This subordinate was speechless at his master's willfulness, but he didn't dare to say anything more. Sir, don't look at how gentle he is right now. If you really annoy him, you won't even know how you died. Let's go, Hans. The red-haired man lazily called out to his subordinate and turned around to leave. He was thinking about how he should arrange his first encounter with the beauty. Chapter 412. Gu Xingyin and her entourage received the best treatment at the Storm Chamber of Commerce. Situ Jean came to Storm Star this time mainly to represent the Empire and the Storm Chamber of Commerce to discuss the purchase of a special interstellar energy or gray iron ore. Gray iron ore was one of the basic materials used to build starships. As the #1 exporter of gray iron ore, the Storm Chamber of Commerce was a worthy ally in the eyes of all forces. Of course, Gu Xingyin did not need to discuss the specific details. Naturally, there were specialized personnel in charge of negotiating with the Storm Chamber of Commerce. All she had to do was show her face, show the Empire's attitude, and express the importance of the Storm Chamber of Commerce. Your Excellency, in the afternoon, I will take you to visit our Storm Star. After lunch, a person in charge of the Storm Chamber of Commerce respectfully came to Gu Xingyin's side. Gu Xingyin happened to have nothing to do. She changed into her daily clothes and strolled around the central business district of Storm Star with 2 personal guards. However, although she did not wear a military uniform and no one knew her identity, her appearance alone attracted the attention of many people. After getting off the hover car for less than half an hour, Gu Xingyin received 3 invitations. These invitations were none other than those young, rich, and bored young masters and young ladies who wanted to have a good time with her. When the person in charge of the Storm Chamber of Commerce saw this situation, he deeply regretted that he did not think of asking Situjin to cover up a little. After all, her appearance was really a bit too attractive. The people of Storm Star had always been open-minded. It was not uncommon for men and women to develop an unusual relationship when they saw eye to eye. On one hand, the person in charge of the Storm Chamber of Commerce regretted it. On the other hand, he had to worry that Situjin would be annoyed by the harassment. If she could not help but make a move, no one on Storm Star would be a match for this SSS-level powerhouse. In fact, he was thinking too much. With Situjin's personality, she probably still felt that this kind of thing was quite fresh. If she really showed the slightest impatience, those invitations would probably not reach her at all. Those 2 personal guards were not just for show. It was normal that Gu Xingyin did not refuse. She was quite curious about this matter. In the Milky Way galaxy, if Situjin was in any place, it would undoubtedly be the Galaxy Empire. Most people might think that she had seen this kind of thing too many times, but in reality, Situjin had never even received a confession in all these years. It was because she was so popular in the Empire that some people had even deified her. As for the men, those who were of the same status as her were old enough to be her grandfather. Those who were of the same age as her were still working hard in the 3 armies. As a result, when Situjin appeared in the Empire, at most 1 or 2 admirers recognized her and offered her a bouquet of flowers. There was nothing else that was even more excessive. After rejecting a few more people, Gu Xingyin felt that it was about time. Later on, the men and women who were attracted by her appearance could not get close to her anymore. Until the man who seemed to be glowing appeared. The moment the red-haired man appeared, Gu Xingyin's body automatically tensed up and entered battle mode. This was a strong person who was not weaker than her. The next moment, her body returned to normal because she felt a familiar aura. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.